The Order of the Assassins was one of the most deadly, notorious, and elusive groups in the medieval world. Legend has it they were a highly trained group of ruthless killers who used ninja-like skills and stealth to silently kill political leaders across the globe. Their assassination of Persian leader Nizam al-Mulk in the 11th century shocked the Muslim world.
The Ismaili assassins are without doubt the most formidable secret society that's ever existed. With one political killing, they tore down an entire empire.
These young men were skillfully trained, and they were the elite of the elite. They were the Navy SEALs and Marines of their day, an organization of stealth political assassins who take out the head of an organization that creates a schism and causes the whole thing to crumble from the top.
In this episode, we investigate these brutally efficient killers, analyze their methods and tactics, and reveal how and why they were so feared across the Middle East.
The whole approach of the assassins, I mean, it was replicated grandmaster by grandmaster for a few hundred years. They had tremendous success. In fact, their reputation and successes just continued to grow.
This was the elevation of political murder to the level of strategy. To eliminate an individual who in fact was an important foe was intended to inspire fear among all others.
These Ismaili assassins were a formidable force. They were feared by the Crusaders, they destroyed a Persian empire, and it required the superpower of the medieval age, the Mongols, to finally extinguish their threat.
And we look at how their skills and tactics have been passed down and copied by today's Islamic terrorists.
The acts may be very, very different. We're talking about targeted political assassination on one point, we're talking about indiscriminate bombing in many cases on the other side. The end is terror.
One could say that today's assassins are equally as effective as the Order of Assassins. They're taking out more people, but because of the media, they're having the same impact. They're distilling fear in a nation instantly, but they're having the same effect. Psychological fear is the worst kind of warfare.
Back in the 11th century, Hassan-i Sabbah was the founder and leader of a mystical Muslim sect which was based in the lands which are now modern-day Syria and Iran. They were called the Nizari Ismailis, but also known as the Hashashin by their enemies. Today we know them as the Assassins, a highly trained group of expert killers. They were deployed to remove the leaders of rival religious sects, and their ruthless and stealthy assassinations have become idolized by many of today's Muslim fanatics.
The Ismaili assassins really came to be due to the inspiration of one man, Hassan-i Sabbah. And this is a guy who has traveled all over Persia. He's come from Cairo, and now he's trying to find a place to really create an order. His motivation is going to be revenge for his Shia devout faith.
He lived as he claimed to believe, that he had no particular interest in the acquisition of political power or wealth, or the conquest of vast kingdoms. There are reports that he, in fact, never even left his house for decades while he studied and elaborated the doctrine of the assassins.
Hassan-i Sabbah had a diamond hardness about him. This is a man who's used to living hard, to trusting very few people, used to the concept of safe houses and knowing those people who he could trust, and also therefore knowing that those would be the people who were highly indoctrinated in the same religious faith as him. an internal toughness, bought of being a fugitive for much of his young life, but also has a hard intellectual edge. And I think what comes through in the writings again and again is that he has a strategy and a vision that looks beyond so many of the people who are in the political sphere at the same time.
He isn't a military commander. He isn't the ruler of a great empire. He essentially starts out as a preacher. He's a teacher. But he is charismatic, and he has this ability to attract people to him and to inspire their loyalty. He uses religion, in a sense, to bring them on board to his group.
Hassan set up a training facility for the assassins at Almut Castle in today's northern Iran. They used ancient drugs, meditation techniques, and the promise of an afterlife in paradise to create an elite and loyal band of killers with complete disregard for their own lives.
Hassan's a really sharp man. He realizes he doesn't have a huge army. It's not his intention anyway. He wants to be an organization of stealth political assassins who take out the head of an organization that creates a schism and causes the whole thing to crumble from the top.
Clearly, this force would have been regarded as a special, an elite unit or an elite group. That is, people who had not only the devotion, but sufficient intelligence to carry out these missions. So it would have been a recruiting process not vastly different from, say, recruiting from spies in the modern age, or recruiting the kind of people who were dropped into occupied Germany during World War II, that they had the knowledge of some other part of the world, or language skills, or the capability to get on by themselves.
It's the prototype for James Bond. You know, you're not going to go in there with a big, loud, marching army. You're going to go in there very subtly and become trusted, or at least not seen. And then, when the time is right, you're going to make your move.
There is no doubt that the assassins themselves within the Ismaili structure were an elite. These were not cannon fodder. These were people who underwent specific and specialist training. These were people who had reached a very high level in terms of their theology as well, and in their understanding of the Ismaili creed. These were people who were identified within the organization with specific uniforms when they were on guard duty for the Grand Master. Of course, when they were on active duty for assassination, their task was to blend in.
The assassins were highly trained killers. They were trained to have the ability and skills to disguise themselves and blend in seamlessly in public places, making them lethally effective and almost impossible to detect. Surviving a mission was considered a deep dishonor, and it's said that families rejoiced when they heard their assassin sons had died, having completed their deadly acts.
The myth of the assassins grows out of their spectacular killings. The fact that they suddenly appear out of the crowd, have not been seen, have not been identified, make the killing, and then wait to be killed by the guards of their target.
When they were doing an assassination, they liked to do it in the broad light of day in a very public place, preferably a mosque or a church. The men who were sent out as assassins were the men who had passed through each tier, each level of esoteric understanding as we know it, and had passed through each tier until the Lord of the Mountain felt that they could be trusted with that sort of duty. But even the lowest initiate had to have that kind of absolute obedience.
It was intended to inspire fear among all others. It was a deterrent strategy. That is, if you come after us, the Ismailis, that will be a death sentence upon you.
The assassins didn't have a country of their own, so they took over castles and fortresses in strategic positions across what is today's Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Jordan, creating a formidable defensive arc in the region. Historian James Watterson takes us on a tour of one of their ruined sites near Amman in Jordan.
I mean, a castle's strength only becomes important if you really want to batter your way into it. But for the Ismailis, you know, a wall as thick as this, it really didn't matter, because when they obtained their castles, they obtained them through subterfuge. They sneaked their way in, so to speak.
The method that Hassan chooses to get Alamut in modern-day Iran, ancient-day Persia, is quite indicative of the strategy he would use in his order of assassins, and that is he kind of infiltrates the local community, and then he makes a proposition to the owner of the castle saying, I will give you a large sum of money, but you need to get out or else.
This was an offer that could not be turned down, because when he looked around, he found that there were Ismaili communities popping up all around him. Essentially, it had become a colony of the creed, and the owner of the castle, well, you may as well up and sell, because they're coming for it anyway.
Hassan was a brilliant tactician. He very slowly set up. He would go to the highest mountain, the higher the better, the more inaccessible the better. Because what he was trying to hold off was an army 1,000 times of what he could ever raise. And so he was using every tactic in the book to try to hang on. And what he ended up building was a series, maybe a dozen of what we know, in that same arc, that same Shia arc that exists today, from the northwest of Iran, across Iraq, and into northern Syria.
The Nizari's Ismaili assassins would always have looked for a castle that was on a high natural peak, because you've got every advantage of being so much higher than your enemy. That's what it's all about. It's not just the build of the castle, it's also the fact that this natural environment puts you up high. It's on solid rock, so they can't dig underneath the walls to make them collapse. It's really difficult for them to launch missiles up at you, arrows, etc., but also you're looking down upon them. You can see your enemy, you can see exactly what he's doing.
Back in the 11th century, Hassan-i Sabbah was the founder and leader of a mystical Muslim sect which was based in the lands which are now modern-day Syria and Iran. They were called Nizari Ishmailis, but also known as the Hashashin by their enemies. Today we know them as the Order of the Assassins, a highly trained group of expert killers who carried out dozens of high-profile assassinations across the Middle East. Primarily, they targeted leaders of rival Muslim sects, who they saw as not as devout as themselves, or who had transgressed from the strict observance of their faith. Dr. Farhad Daftari is head of research at the Institute for Ismaili Studies in London and is one of the world's leading experts on the group.
The Ismaili did go on assassinations, on targeted assassinations, to remove the key military enemies of the community because they could not raise and mobilize large armies, as was the case with their opponents. And it was the name Hashishi, which gave rise to the legend, which has it that they used hashish as part of their indoctrination and training.
So Hassan is really quite brilliant in his strategy. He recruits young men in their early teens, and they come into the castle and they see, wealth and just the coolness of the order that exceeds anything they've ever known. But then he plays on their psychological desire to have a comfortable life with Allah in the afterlife. And what he does is he drugs them with the drink. They pass out, and he physically takes their bodies to a garden that is literally paradise on earth.
And it was a beautiful place. It was literally a land of milk and honey. It was heaven as described by Muhammad. It was filled with beautiful women who gave you whatever you asked for. Wine was given them. They spent the night in that pleasure garden. And they awoke the next morning lying in front of the sheik of the mountain, the old man of the mountain.
And this is when he tells them, if you would like to return to that state of ecstasy for eternity, then this is what you have to do. Can you imagine the impact that this would have had on a young man? They probably have just had their first experience with women. They've just experienced something beyond their wildest dreams, and now they know they can have that again. And they've been shown this by a man who they respect anyways. He's pious, he's devout, he has the same faith that they do. So these guys will now do literally anything. They will gladly give up their life for the order.
To go into enemy territory and to plan an assassination and to infiltrate the staff or household of the intended victim, to plan the operation, to carry out the operation, this is not the kind of thing you would do on drugs. I mean, what people do on drugs is hold up convenience stores and usually screw it up. I mean, we do have whacked out people who are violent criminal predators in our society, but planning something as elaborate as an assassination would be far beyond them. So it is doubtful. Certainly there's no evidence. It appears to be stories spread by individuals who are trying to explain the apparently bizarre behavior of these individuals, or stories who were spread by the enemies of this sect in a way to discredit them, to say, well, they're all a bunch of crazy druggies or something like that. But doesn't appear to have any basis in fact, and operationally would be contrary to the operation and also contrary to the belief system.
The assassins' reputation for deception and swift kills spread like wildfire through the 12th century. They were highly trained to use both their reflexes and assassination skills to complete their missions, using a specific weapon, a curved knife with a poisoned blade. Professor James Watterson has spent much of his academic life investigating and researching the lives of the assassins. He confirms they were expert knife handlers who were trained to strike fast with extreme stealth.
The Ismaili assassins' choice of weapon obviously was the dagger, and the dagger holds a number of advantages for them. They're going to get close to their victim anyway because they don't care about surviving the attack. Also, with a dagger, you can confirm the kill. Sure, it's going to be safer using a sword to be at arm's length, but with a dagger, this is the way that you finish people off and kill them on the battlefield as well. And of course, a dagger is going to be easy to conceal. Our assassins are disguised. They're disguised as holy men. They're disguised as ambassadors. They're disguised as bodyguards of the sultans that they're actually going to dispatch and murder.
Knives are still highly prized items in the Middle East. Abdel Razak Abu Muhayzin is a third-generation knife maker based in Amman, Jordan.
My family makes the knife since 5 generations, since my great-grandfather learned how to make a knife. Well, yes, to make a good knife, you should choose the good steel. It should be solid, flexible, not too heavy. Well, the best knife for Hashashin to kill is the double-edged sharp knife, or dagger.
The dagger that an Ismaili assassin would have used is a double-edged blade. That means that you can stab down into the victim between, if he's wearing a chainmail coif that covers the neck and head, and then an armored breastplate, you can get in between that with the double-edged blade and stab downwards. but also, of course, you can slash as well. It could be that you've got to fight your way into your victim. We know that when they were attempting to kill the Sultan Saladin, they had to fight past several bodyguards to get into the room to kill him. That would have been a slashing motions to clear the way, and then the stab down. So double-edged, very strong blade, and we know that the steel made in the Islamic world at this time was of a high-intensity, strong steel, carbon steel blade, and again, an ability to slash and also to stab down too.
According to early written sources, the first of many political murders by the sect took place in 1092. An assassin, disguised as a holy man, approached Nizam al-Mulk, a local leader, as he was being carried in a carriage by his guards. Without fear of the repercussions, and before the guards could act in defense, the assassin fatally stabbed Nizam in the chest.
At this point, the assassin just stands absolutely stock still. He doesn't care about the fact that the guards are closing in on him and they're going to kill him. He's completed his mission, and in fact, his sacrifice being killed by the guards is part of that blood rite that's so important to the assassin modus operandi.
For somebody sent out from the assassins to do a killing, should he survive it, that was shameful. If he survived it, it was often because he had failed. It was probably because he was caught.
With the assassins, we have all those elements of a secret society. They are clear-minded about the mission.
They spent months, long periods of time, getting close to their victims, and then at that point, seizing the moment to carry out the murder.
If we have assassin sleeper cells that are waiting for the order from the Grand Master to actually undertake a political killing at the right time, and at an appropriate juncture, then how do you get those messages to those sleeper cells, and how do you keep sleeper cells safe? This is through the lay followers of the faith. Merchants, we know, were very commonly Ismailis, and of course merchants enjoy free passage throughout the Islamic Empire. Also, the movement of money in the Islamic Empire was relatively simple and straightforward. Our word check is an invention of the Islamic word sak. It means I could draw money in a bank in Alexandria, even if the bank is somewhere in Western Persia. So these are the underpinning structures through which the assassin can move relatively freely to get safety, then to get close to his target, and then for the Grand Masters to send that message so that not only is the killing going to take place, but it's going to take place at the right strategic moment for the Grand Master.
The message they were trying to leave was, you're not safe. You think you're safe. Because in those days, they had the same philosophy that infested the Middle Ages all the way through, that they were higher, they were surrounded by their own personal bodyguard and their personal troops, and the message they were getting was, it doesn't matter if we want to kill you, you're dead.
The Order of the Assassins were a highly feared Muslim medieval killing force who carried out targeted assassinations of Middle Eastern leaders in the 11th and 12th centuries. Their leader was a semi-mythical figure, Hassan-i Sabbah, who used a wide range of training techniques, including the use of meditation and the drug hashish. Primarily, their targets were leaders of rival Muslim sects, who they saw as not as devout as themselves, or who had transgressed from the strict observance of their faith. The assassins operated as small one- or two-man teams, who struck without warning and often without detection. One of their most infamous encounters was a deadly threat that was sent to the Turkish Sultan Saladin, the ruler of Egypt at the end of the 12th century. But rather than killing him, they relied on psychological intimidation.
These guys are now the world's elite political assassins. And a great example of that is when they chose not to kill, but to incite fear.
The Ismaili assassins, this time in Syria, they had a Grand Master called Sinar. He knew that Even if he killed Saladin, there would be a replacement. One of his brothers would replace him, Saif-ad-Din, for example, or one of his sons, or even one of his nephews, and that they would still face a formidable foe. So what he attempted to do, the Grand Master in Syria, was to bring Saladin to a point of negotiation. And he did this through psychological terror.
This incredibly powerful man, Saladin, while he was laying siege to a Syrian city, very close to where the assassins were in the west, he awoke one morning, rolled over, and found, to his horror, an assassin dagger in the sand next to him.
And waking up beside a dagger implanted in the earth beside his bed, with a short note saying that we already hold you, we can take you at any time.
Imagine the fear. How could they possibly have penetrated our security? How did that happen? They must be everywhere. The psychological fear totally changed the Sultan's behavior and policy. Result achieved. Nobody had to die. But he got exactly what he wanted, the Grand Master did.
As news spread across the Muslim world of their killings, and more importantly, their tactics of intimidation, the legend of the assassins was slowly born. Within the space of just a few years, they became the most feared military group in the world.
Even at the height of its powers, the Ismaili sect would have had very few Fidayeen assassin operatives in the field. But what is important is the psychological impact of these spectacular killings. The fact that they suddenly appear out of the crowd, have not been seen, have not been identified, make the killing and then wait to be killed by the guards of their target. There is also an important part of this. Few of the killings in Syria take place in the courtyard of the grand mosques. These are the most public places. The crowd will spread these tales throughout Syria. It's obvious in that respect. But what also happens is there becomes a myth of the Ismaili assassin. They start to acquire in these stories supernatural powers. There's a story of the Grand Master of Syria who was known as cultivating these stories as well, that he could turn into a gigantic glowworm, that he could levitate or if he could float around the castle, etc., that he could metamorphose into a snake, that he could have conversations with horses, that he understood the secret language of animals.
And they lived on a potent reputation of being sorcerers, terrifying men with terrifying secrets and terrifying powers that inspired detestation amongst the Sunnis especially, and fear amongst the Franks. Everyone was afraid of them.
They were oppressed a lot, so a lot of the motivation of the order appeared to be taking out political leaders who opposed their view of the world.
Paranoia is a perfect word to describe the disorder and the chaos that occurred inside an Islamic royal court once an assassination had taken place. There was deep distrust of people that you worked with. People were looking over their shoulders at all times. There are stories of individuals wearing armor at all times of the day and night to avoid assassination. Such was the fear of the blade of the Ismailis.
There were not thousands of assassinations. There were not hundreds of assassinations. By the best count that we have, during the decades that the original leader commanded the assassins, there were 50 assassinations, a small number. And yet with those 50 targeted killings, this group was able to create this legend, this fear.
So the aggressive nature of the assassin warriors was actually a defensive posture. By taking out political leaders, they were preserving their religious turf, as it were.
The Ismailis and the leader of the Ismailis, his primary objective was not to go out and kill people. His primary objective was to awaken people, to call them to this belief system. The use of the assassins was a necessity to defend the followers. It wasn't the objective.
To add to their mythological status and legend, the assassin's founder and Grand Master, Hassan-i Sabbah, also had a favorite, if rather gruesome, party trick, which he would play on his followers.
He would call together the faithful, and he would bury a man in a hole very near where he sat, and all you would see is the man's head and a plate closed on either side of his head. And he would have the man talk, and he would say, you see, this man is dead, it's only his head. He's talking to you, the dead is talking to you. And he would tell all the faithful, get out and go away, and once they did, he'd pull the poor guy out and cut his head off and carry his head out. Nobody questioned at that point that the man had been dead the whole time, but he could make the dead talk.
The assassins were a legendary group of highly trained killers that operated across the Middle East in the 12th century. Their mysterious leader was Hassan-i Sabbah, who ran a mystical sect which was based in the lands which are now modern-day Syria and Iran. They were a highly trained group of expert assassins whose reputation spread across most of the world and down through the centuries, influencing many of the Islamic extremists today. Although the assassins had essentially died out by the end of the 13th century, experts can see lots of similarities between them and modern-day terrorist groups. Brian Michael Jenkins is an expert on terrorism and has briefed both the Pentagon and the White House on the subject.
There are a number of parallels between the assassins and contemporary terrorism. For one thing, those who commonly resort to terrorist tactics lack power in the conventional sense, and therefore they have to adopt tactics and strategies that do not try to match the military superiority of their foes, but instead take advantage of their own capabilities. Instead of full frontal assaults, open battle, they're going to operate by means of treachery.
I think it comes down to that key word of terror. The acts may be very, very different. We're talking about targeted political assassination on one point, we're talking about indiscriminate bombing in many cases on the other side. But the end is terror. The Ismailis managed to produce that terror by the skill of their operations, but also the fact that there was a psychological component by the paranoia that this sowed amongst the royal courts, the feeling that there could be an Ismaili assassin amongst one's bodyguard, amongst one's family, amongst one's close confidants. Modern day terror, I suggest, does that by the mass effect. It does that by the sheer size of its body count. And the fact that we feel vulnerable as a society rather than as the individuals at the top of the society. The Ismailis worked at the top of the pyramid of power, and that's where they sowed the seeds of paranoia, that's where they sowed the seeds of doubt, and that's how they brought states to the negotiating table, and that's how they managed to survive.
The terrorists of today, or the assassins of their time, manipulated perceptions. They created fear and alarm, which caused people to exaggerate their strength.
The way an assassin approached his target was very much different to a modern terrorist, but unfortunately a lot of people don't see that. And I'm not saying only Westerners have been taken in by this myth. it is entirely possible that an ISIS lone wolf assassin might be inspired by the assassins. That doesn't make it any more true. The assassins covered the same territory, that same axis of land from the north of Iran to the north of Syria with the same faith. They didn't operate like a modern terrorist. The assassins were brilliant. A modern terrorist doesn't seem to care who they kill, and we're not just talking about 9/11, talking about the Sunnis attacking the Shias on their holiest day of Ashura with car bombs. They don't care women and children, innocent people. They don't care how many they kill. They don't care. Whereas the assassins operated with surgical precision to go after the one enemy with the realization and the understanding that the men who followed him were only followers. But if you can terrify or kill or take out that one man, that is the greatest weapon you can put in the hands of a force that is overwhelmed numerically and overwhelmed in weapons and in money. It's a very clever tactic and almost a humane one in some ways.
One vital differentiation, I believe, between the Ismaili assassins and the modern-day terrorism that we see throughout the Middle East and beyond in our own age is that despite the fact that this was a period where there were many children on thrones, there is not a single instance of the Ismaili assassins killing a woman or a child. These are discrete killings. These are not killings that affect even the general public. There's no collateral damage with these killings whatsoever. They are highly skilled and they are highly targeted. And in a very strange way, I actually feel that's quite commendable.
Assassination is part of the tactical repertoire of today's terrorists. They blew up the Prime Minister of Spain. They killed Lord Mountbatten in England. They attempted to kill the Prime Minister. There were plots against the royal family in the United Kingdom. If you look at the history of the United States, admittedly a country with a violent history, 12 of our 13 most recent presidents over the last 80 years, one was killed by an assassin, several were shot at by assassins, and all but one, 12 of the 13, have been the targets of assassination plots.
One could say that today's assassins are equally as effective as the order of assassins. They're taking out more people, but because of the media, they're having the same impact. They're distilling fear in a nation instantly. And they're not doing it by word of mouth, they're doing it by media. And that's the difference. But they're having the same effect. Psychological fear is the worst kind of warfare.
You see a small number of spectacular murders being exaggerated and creating this, again, atmosphere of fear and alarm. We have many people today in the United States and in Europe for whom fear of terrorism is a real component of their lives. Many people fear the so-called fifth columns or sleepers. That is, terrorists who have already infiltrated the country and are awaiting some signal to carry out attacks. That was true in the time of the assassins. You have no way of counting those you don't know about. If, in response to terrorism, we become terrified as these medieval princes were terrified of assassins, then we're going to create a neo-medieval society and live in fear behind perimeters, physical and electronic ones. That's the danger.
The Order of the Assassins were a deadly force in the 11th and 12th centuries across the entire Middle East. Their operatives were highly trained and entirely ruthless in carrying out their top-secret missions. In fact, there are many similarities between the ancient Order of the Assassins and modern-day terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The Assassins' unique blend of deadly skills, extreme stealth, and huge impact can be seen in many modern terrorist attacks today. But as all-powerful as their legend and reputation was, the Order of the Assassins made a fatal miscalculation in the 13th century. They sent a large contingent of men to assassinate Mancha Khan, the leader of the Mongols, and grandson of the infamous Genghis Khan, who was threatening to invade the Middle East. It was a grand plan which went spectacularly wrong. In the end, in revenge, the Mongols hunted down and wiped out the Order of the Assassins, killing its leader and destroying its castles.
The Ismaili assassins came within a hair's breadth of destroying the superpower of the medieval age. 400 assassins were sent to assassinate the great Khan of the Mongol Empire. If they had succeeded, the history of the world today would look significantly different. The demise of the Ismaili assassins in Persia and in Syria are related to a number of things. The Mongol war machine had fought its way right down through China. It had fought itself right across the Islamic Empire. It had fought itself right into Russia. This was the superpower of the medieval age, and it was beyond the reach of any other power that had been known before.
The assassins, the entire order, led by the Grand Master, were always very politically astute, and they knew that times of political unrest is the time when they would be most successful. But now they were facing enemies who had a hierarchy. If you kill the top guy, a new guy moves in. So there's no delay, there's no disruption, there's no falling down from the top anymore. They realize the Mongols are going to be the formidable enemy that would probably end their existence. And they realize they have one shot to go in and take out the top members of the Mongol army.
There is a story of the Ismaili assassin, the penultimate Grand Master, sending 40, or some sources even say 400 assassins all the way to Karakoram, to the Mongol capital, to attempt to kill the Grand Khan.
They fail, and the Mongols are so enraged and so indignant that the assassination was even attempted. They say, okay, now you're in trouble. Now we're coming after you.
The Mongols were prepared to step themselves into a level of horror, terror, and blood that no other power before had even contemplated.
And it was an annihilation. It turned into a genocide, and it very quickly marked the end of the Order of Assassins.
They led a reign of terror and fear across much of the Middle East for well over 2 centuries. But their plan to kill the Mongol leader would turn out to be their last significant act. In the end, the order was all but wiped out by Mancha Khan in the mid-13th century.
The Ismaili assassins are without doubt the most formidable secret society that's ever existed. With one political killing, they tore down an entire empire.
The whole approach of the assassins, I mean, it was replicated grandmaster by grandmaster for a few hundred years. They had tremendous success. In fact, their reputation and successes just continued to grow.
These Ismaili assassins were a formidable force for nearly 2 centuries. They were feared by the Crusaders, they destroyed a Persian empire, and it required the superpower of the medieval age, the Mongols, to finally extinguish their threat.
What the assassins succeeded in doing was branding political murder. They gave their name to a tactic which has survived the organization itself. When we talk about assassination today, what we're talking about is a strategy devised by an old man in a remote fortress in Persia 1,000 years ago.
The Order of the Assassins was a group of highly trained, highly stealthy, expert killers that carried out a series of high-profile killings across the Middle East in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. Their legend spread fast, and they were feared across the entire region. Their training, tactics, and absolute dedication to their deadly missions was legendary. And although they were eventually wiped out by the Mongols, their legacy and contribution to history is an important one, with many of their skills still being used by Islamic terrorists today. The Ku Klux Klan is the most notorious white supremacist group in the world. But how did it grow to such large numbers over the last 150 years? How has the Klan continued to be a malicious force in American society? And what has been its impact?
Nowhere else in American history is such terror so widespread without organization.
It was war between North and South.
The Klan is the oldest terrorist group in the United States, and in a sense, really the original one.
The initial Klan was set up very privately, the most secret of secret organizations.
The Ku Klux Klan is a peculiarly American phenomenon, but hate and white nationalism is an international one.
How big is the KKK today? And is it still recruiting members?
The Ku Klux Klan was born here and thrives here. I didn't say thrived, I said thrives here.
The advantage of having a secret society is that nobody knows what your numbers are, nobody knows where you are.
I think the Ku Klux Klan will be with us as long as we have people with hate in their hearts. And I think the real threat from the white supremacist movement probably takes a different form today.
And is America heading for a new race war?
You cut off its head, you think it's dead, and eventually it grows another head.
These are folks who have kept away from the cities, who want their countryside preserved. They endlessly see an invader, and they endlessly see that any change, whether it is with a flag, or a law, or a custom, will endanger them.
We have always had political extremism of one stripe or another, but never in such a kind of criminal form as we see it in the Klan.
The Civil War has never ended. It's still the fight that America fights for its own identity. Southerners are still Southerners, they've been hundreds of years. Northerners are still Northerners. What saves us are all the new people who come and keep between us.
We go inside the KKK today to reveal the truth about the most infamous white power group in the world. In the aftermath of the American Civil War, many ex-Confederate soldiers paraded the streets in white sheets and hoods in an attempt to attract young men to join their new social group, the Ku Klux Klan. They saw the abolishment of slavery as a threat to their country and God-given rights. As a result, Klan membership quickly grew to millions across the whole southern United States. The secrecy was tantamount as their crimes escalated, often committed by senior society figures.
Well, the Klan initially arose in pretty much a direct response to what happened at the end of the Civil War, the freeing of the slaves and ultimately the making of citizens of the slaves. It began in a small town in Pulaski, Tennessee, near the Alabama border. And really, what it was initially was a kind of prankster society. There were 6 ex-Confederate officers who got together, who were bored in this small town, and decided to form a little club. They used the Greek name for circle, kuklos, and that is where the name Ku Klux Klan comes from. They dressed up in all kinds of wild outfits. This pretty quickly turned into more or less harassing black residents in the area, making fun of them. They would do certain kinds of things like dress up in such a way that was supposed to suggest that they were the ghosts of Confederate officers from the Civil War.
The story that 6 young men met to form a kind of social club with a kind of mystical circle in it is probably has a kernel of truth. But I have always believed that the Klan started in places like Pulaski, Tennessee, because it was in the edge of what was a cotton-growing area. Almost everywhere you find the Klan in 1866 and 1867, it is young men trying to resurrect their lives in places where cotton had once been king, and they wanted to restore that.
The initial Klan was set up very privately, the most secret of secret organizations. No one really knew for certain who was in the Klan, but the only name connected with it was the ex-Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest.
It developed into a movement, essentially, of small, like-minded groups that popped up in various places around the South. It wasn't until about 2 years later, 1867, where a meeting was held in Nashville where Nathan Bedford Forrest, a former Confederate general and slave master, was made the Grand Wizard, which was the title for the leader of the Ku Klux Klan for the very first time. Forrest really led the Klan through its very most violent period and, in effect, terrorized, in particular the Republican Party, into staying away from the polls, into backing away from any kind of political work, and so on.
The first Civil Rights Act with any teeth was passed in 1871, along with something called the Enforcement Acts, and they were passed because of the violence being perpetrated by the Klan. They were passed by President Grant, who had had enough. And he also declared the Klan a terrorist organization, which meant that if you were discovered to be a Klansman, you could be hanged. And so the membership was very secret, and we really don't know how many. Historians play games, make estimates, maybe 15% of the white males, but we don't know.
In fact, at the beginning of the 20th century, it's estimated that the first incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan membership had grown to an incredible 5 million people, some 25% of the South.
We know very little about the ritual of the Klan. Again, these men, they lived underground like moles. We do know about the dress. They were always masked. Very often, they would wear cloaks. Generally, it was putting a potato sack or something over your head, putting something around you to hide who you were, getting on your horse and riding out.
Even in the early days of the Klan, its members wore masks to hide their identity, but at the same time, giving the group a distinctly menacing appearance.
These gentlemen of the South definitely did not want anyone to know their identity, and that was the chief point in being masked. The mask is the only thing that would remain with the Klan through all of its days, is that they had to cover their faces because they were too cowardly to come out and say who they were. They didn't want anyone to know who they were. I've seen pictures of Klan riders. You do see the occasional conical-looking cap, but the conical cap as we know it, it's been connected to a dozen things, including, ironically enough, the Judenhut, the Jewish hat that the Germans often made the Jews wear in earlier centuries. But it's believed that the later Klan connected it with the Spanish Inquisition.
Today, the mask and conical hoods have become the most powerful symbols of white supremacy and the Klan that exist.
To me, the Klan has always been a very logical manifestation of rural life, that you band together for survival, that you go through certain rituals that give you power, in a place that often makes you feel powerless. By banding together, that power can manifest itself far more effectively than through individual protest or, shall we say, individual acting out. The Klan has an ethic of the group dynamic that I think reappears each time the Klan reappears.
A Klansman or Klanswoman, they come from all walks of life. So they have different perspectives. But one thing they all hold at the top of their priority list is preservation of the white race.
Behold the fiery cross, still brilliant, it shall burn bright as morning. for all decades.
I mean, look, despite the fact that the Klan today is incredibly weak, the reality is that individual Klansmen still pose a very real and significant danger, at least to people immediately around them.
Let me say that the cross is an inspiration, a sign of the Christian religion, a symbol of faith, hope, and love. Amen. Amen.
The Ku Klux Klan is the most notorious white supremacist group in America. But how did this group grow to such large numbers over the last century? What impact has it had on politics? And what influence does it still have today? In 2015, there are estimated to be about 5,000 Ku Klux Klan members in the US, nearly all in the southern states. They regularly get together for rallies, barbecues, and even cross burnings. Members include teachers, accountants, hospital staff, and even local politicians. A lot of Klan members are also in the military and carry concealed weapons. They allowed our cameras to film a gathering in Roxborough, North Carolina.
This is a social gathering that we're having. It's part of the Klan, the Ku Klux and the Loyal White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And our goal here today is to have a meeting to gather our white race together and wake up white America and let them know what's going on in the world. Our race, our history, our culture, our heritage comes from thousands of years of history, and we don't want to lose it. And it's being destroyed by Zog. Zog is the Zionist-occupied government. The Jews own everything. And through all the retail stores and the advertising flyers that you receive in the mail, all they show is this racial mixing, and we're tired of it.
Well, this is the national rally, and brothers from all over the states are coming in, and it's a good place where we're all together and can do this.
We're part of this organization to help save our history, because we are losing our history.
I want my son to grow up knowing what's right. I mean, black and white dating just ain't, I don't agree with it. My son needs to learn and know how I feel. We try to, that's what we're here for, fighting for, every day. That's what I joined for, and that's what I want my son to say.
It's all about the white kids. That's what we're here for the future generations, to teach them. If nobody teaches them, they won't know the truth.
The Klan has always brought the family along, because if what they're trying to perpetuate is family and what they perceive to be the pure family values, it's very much like farm life always was. The kids learned the chores from early on. They increased their ability to do the chores as they matured, and when the adults aged out, they took their place.
The Klan today is really a shadow of its former self. The Klan is the oldest American terrorist group and probably will be the longest lived. But many people in the white supremacist movement today would rather identify with something that maybe had a more modern air to it. A different kind of white nationalist group like the National Socialist Movement. So although the Klan is kind of falling on hard times, there are probably 70 chapters, 23 or so different organizations all fighting amongst themselves, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 Klansmen. The white supremacist movement is actually quite large. For example, there are at least 300,000 registered users on something called Stormfront, which is the leading neo-Nazi portal. And most of those people are, of course, people in this country. And so, the number of people involved in the white supremacist movement is large. They don't typically identify with the Klan. And in many ways, there's a kind of a floating away from organized groups because, the internet is so powerful. I don't have to go to a Klan rally. I don't have to go to a cross burning to get my fill of hate. I don't need to go into a meeting to get my racist views validated any longer. I can get them validated, just sitting in my pajamas at my house, Dylan Roof was someone like that, the Charleston shooter. He's kind of radicalized online. No evidence that I ever went to a meeting of any sort, but he clearly had, drunk the Kool-Aid of white supremacy.
2 members of the Ku Klux Klan were arrested today in connection with the death of a young black man who was beaten and hanged from a tree in Mobile, Alabama. The FBI says Michael Donald was killed in a random act of Klan revenge for the murder of a white policeman.
On March 21st, 1981, a 19-year-old African-American man, Michael Donald, was stopped by Klansmen in Mobile, Alabama. He was then viciously beaten, hung from a tree, and then dragged down the road behind a vehicle on a rope. It remains one of the most brutal, racist attacks in American history. The local police chief today is Lawrence Batiste.
We are headed to an area of town where Michael Donald was hanged by a number of individuals in his community, which claimed association or ties with the Klan. The death of Michael Donald created a feeling of fear and apprehension. Didn't really know where you could and you could not go as a result of Michael Donald's death.
We first became involved in the Michael Donald case by really reading about in the newspaper. There was this talk that it was a drug deal gone bad. We were suspicious of that always. The FBI and the Justice Department broke the case. We saw the 2 people who were convicted. One person had pled guilty, another person was convicted at a trial, and the rest of us thought, it wasn't just these 2 fellows. There must have been something more behind it. The Klan had a long, long history of violence, and we began to investigate the case quite extensively.
We're currently on Michael Donald Avenue. This sign here is a landmark for Michael Donald. It says on March 21st, 1981, 19-year-old Michael Donald was abducted, beaten, killed, and hung from a tree by members of the Ku Klux Klan. To have a black man hanging from a tree sent a message that racism still exists. It may exist in secrecy, but it still exists, and that there are people in this community that have a stake in saying, we don't want you guys here. And so it did send a loud message, sent the message that you need to be careful about where you go, when you go, and who you go with.
Stop the Klan now! Stop the Klan now!
In the end, the accused, Klan member Henry Hayes, was tried and sentenced to death for the lynching and murder of Michael Donald.
A dramatic decision today in a courtroom in Mobile, Alabama. A judge has sentenced a member of the Ku Klux Klan to death for the murder of a young black man.
What happened to Michael Donald was a terrible thing. These men who lynched him, one of them's been sentenced to death, one of them's in jail for the rest of his life, and that's where they should be. But you can't hold the organization responsible. That's why we proved that the Klan had a policy or a custom and practice of carrying out its goals through violence. We had a very graphic thing from the Klan's newspaper. The Klan's newspaper was called the Fiery Cross, right? The idea was we're purifying Christianity, and this is what black people deserve. You turn the page and there's a black man lynched. And that was a message, that violence was okay, that black people deserve to be lynched.
The lynching and death of Michael Donald at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan shows all too dramatically just how brutal they were in the 20th century. And this tragic incident proves what many still fear, that the Klan still has an extreme element who are willing to torture, maim, and kill to get their dangerous ideology across. The Ku Klux Klan are a white supremacist organization with its roots in the deep south of America. At its peak towards the end of the 19th century, it could boast millions of members. But today those numbers have shrunk to a few thousand hardcore followers, who are all the more radical and dangerous. The US government and the FBI are well aware of the KKK's brutality. They spent a great deal of time and money trying to infiltrate the Klan, to get firsthand and eyewitness accounts of exactly what's been going on. Michael Frieson's father was an undercover FBI agent working for J. Edgar Hoover inside the Klan in the 1960s.
My dad got out of Army Air Corps in World War II and went directly into the FBI and was an FBI agent from, say, 1948 till about 70. He came to Greensboro because Greensboro was one of the centers of the racial unrest in the 60s. He was assigned to work on the Klan and develop informants in the Klan through a program that Hoover called COINTELPRO White Hate, which was basically an investigation of all the white hate groups in the United States. He was fortunate to get a lot of people at the top of the North Carolina Klan, the United Klans of America in North Carolina. His primary informant was George Dorset. George Dorset was a house painter and a preacher. He had a very powerful fire and brimstone speaking style.
The devil as a roaring lion.
And that meshed well in the Klan because he was one of the primary speakers at the rallies. So he became sort of the fiery voice of the Klan in North Carolina.
The peanut-brain, God-denying, atheist, agnostic, infidels.
My dad, he told me many times that he approached Dorset 4 or 5 times before he was willing to actually cooperate with him, give him information. I think there was a reluctance initially to work with the FBI, but I think the money was good.
Frierson was one of the FBI's best agents, gaining valuable information about the KKK from informants for many years, including details of members, rallies, and potential targets. His work was recognized by J. Edgar Hoover, the Bureau's chief.
Over the years, Mr. Hoover sent my dad many letters of commendation. Many of them were for work he had done in the racial field. He was one of the top FBI agents recruiting Klan informants in North Carolina. He says, "I'm pleased to commend you and advise you that I've approved an incentive award for recognition of outstanding services in a matter of considerable interest to the Bureau in the racial field. Your skillful and effective efforts in developing and handling confidential sources resulted in a great deal of success in this area of our operations." And this is counterintelligence, right? It goes beyond information gathering. They're basically trying to break the Klan up, sow dissent and cause splinter groups to be formed and that kind of thing. So.
With expanded jurisdiction in the fields of organized crime and civil rights, the FBI scored decisive blows against Ku Klux Klan violence.
When details of George Dorset spying for the FBI emerged in 1965, it caused a huge upset within the Klan. He was forced into police protection for his own safety and banned from attending Klan meetings.
As is well known now, George Dorset was also the informer. He was, in a sense, the snitch, even at the time he was rallying the troops. Frankly, I don't think anyone's ever come to grips with that, even he, before his guilt or whatever it was he ended up with. He essentially was doing something, I think, that he truly believed in, and at the same time selling it out. So you could argue that George Dorset was the true realist. He knew that the days of the Klan were measured, they were numbered, they would end, but he wanted to get the truth in as long as he could.
There's little doubt that the FBI did have some success with their infiltration of the Klan, but in turn, it also led to a deeper radicalization of splinter groups who have gone further underground.
Despite the jokes making their way around the South that half the people in any Klan meeting were FBI informants, that wasn't true. The Klan was being reborn. It was being reborn quickly. There were lynchings by the score, there were beatings, there were people being threatened. It was very much a replay of something that I think most Northerners and intellectuals thought was long dead. It was a replay of the old Klan.
Secrecy has always been an important element in the Klan. Susan Sutton from the Indiana Historical Society has found a small figurine which used to be placed outside meetings to indicate whether it was a fully Klan event or whether non-Klan members were present.
What we have here is a statuette that would have been in use by the individual Claverns. The statuette would stand at the point of entry for members. And the story is that if both arms were in place, including this one, which is removable, then the people present were all members, and it was safe to speak about anything. If the arm was not in place, like this, then there were people present who were not members, and so any kind of secret business was not to be discussed. He says on the bottom, K-I-G-Y, which means Klansman, I greet you. And of course, he's only greeting them if his arm is in place.
The advantage of having a secret society is that nobody knows what your numbers are, nobody knows where you are. And as far as the way the Klan viewed itself in terms of their secrecy, they had no shame about being secret. They knew that being so secret inflated their numbers in people's mind.
The so-called mystery and sexiness of the Klan is such that we actually have tiny little Klan groups popping up in places like Australia and Germany and so on. There's a kind of weird romance associated with it.
Although their numbers are rapidly diminishing, the Klan still has a passionate following in the South. A recent gathering in Roxborough, North Carolina, allowed our cameras in as they prepared a large cross for the evening's burning. Some members claim that a new war is coming, where the white majority will, as they put it, take America back.
The lighting of this cross represents Jesus Christ is the light of the world. He is our existence. He is the reason that we are on this earth. And so we light this cross in honor of what he has given to us. We're not the first to do this. You know, this has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years.
This is our Confederate battle flag. What it represents is our Confederate soldiers in the South. And in 1958, the Confederacy, or the Confederate veterans, soldiers, were brought in as U.S. veterans, and their gravestones are being desecrated, the flags are being torn off them, and nobody's doing anything about it. They're destroying us. They're trying to kill us. They're wiping us off the face of this planet, and we want to wake up America and put a stop to it.
And now then they're trying to take the Klan out of history, out of our history, out of our Southern heritage. And y'all got that looking good. Then once they get rid of our Southern heritage, they will not be satisfied until they destroy the heritage of this United States.
The cross lighting represents the light of Jesus and how he shines down over all of us. It is important because our biggest thing is our Christian base. Our kids definitely need to know about their heritage and where they came from. They need to be proud in their race and know that it's okay to be white now.
Despite the Klan's high media profile today, the initiation ceremony and sacred oaths undertaken by those joining the Klan remain a closely guarded secret.
When you are inducted or initiated into the Ku Klux Klan, you go through a secret ritual, a secret initiation ceremony in which you give an oath and you give a pledge to preserve the white race, to preserve white womanhood. You give your life. You also make a promise never to reveal any Klan business to aliens. An alien is anyone who is a non-Klan member, and to always uphold the values and policies of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
Young white people, they see the movement for Black Lives Matter, and they say, gosh, we're losing the country. What about us? You know, and so they try to figure out a way to kind of express what in their mind is ethnic pride in kind of a warped way. We've seen plenty of cases of young people in the North with Confederate flags. Well, what can that mean? That's not the historic Confederacy. It's just an expression of whiteness in their minds because they feel embattled.
There are no real boundaries in this. It's just part of a social movement that takes your money, organizes your energies, and engages your families. You get everything in one package. You get the costumes, you get the ideology, you get the family concerns. It has elements of the church, it builds community, and most of all, it keeps out the alien. It promises you that your children will have a future that you control, not them.
The Ku Klux Klan are the most famous white supremacist organization in the United States. Its origins start back at the end of the 19th century, when it attracted a huge following in the southern states, and is still active today, though with just a fraction of the membership. After what was known as the first wave of the Ku Klux Klan back in the end of the 19th century, a second wave flourished in the early 20th century. On the most part, it attracted all sorts of regular law-abiding citizens who helped with good social causes. But of course, there was also the constant undercurrent of racially motivated hatred.
The Ku Klux Klan returns to the South, complete with traditional white hoods.
One of its leaders was a politician called D.C. Stevenson, who was appointed state leader, or Grand Dragon of the Klan in Indiana. In 1925, he was tried and convicted in a notorious abduction, rape, and murder of a young white woman, Madge Oberholzer, a state education official. His trial, conviction, and imprisonment ended America's belief of Klan leaders as law-abiding citizens. It was a huge scandal at the time.
This is Irvington, and this is where D.C. Stevenson decided to build his mansion, over here. As you can see, it definitely has a southern flavor for a northern state. When D.C. Stevenson built this house after the 1922 and the 1925 elections, when virtually all these politicians were in his pocket, his favorite expression was, "I am the law in Indiana." And oddly enough, at parties in this house, his second favorite expression about politics was that you're safe in politics. Only one thing can ruin you, to be found in bed with a live man or a dead woman. Well, in Stevenson's case, it was a dead woman.
He imprisoned Oberholzer in a small room above his garage, where it said he repeatedly tortured and raped her.
He finally realized that she wasn't going to die. He did something that is so expressive of the nutty megalomania of the man, it's unbelievable. He had one of his bodyguards carry her back to her house, walked her up the stairs, dumped her on the bed, walked out.
Get in there.
Not a word.
When the boarder said, "Who are you?" he kept his face down. He said, "My name is Taylor. She's been in an auto accident, but it was a mild one. She'll be fine," and walked out the door. Then, when the boarder, who was in the kitchen at the time, the rest of the family was gone, again, looking for Madge, she climbed the stairs and found Madge on the bed. The entire front of the dress she had worn to dinner 3 days before was open. Her breasts covered, black and blue, and oozing blood. She could barely speak. All she could say was to ask for her mother. The woman asked, "What happened to you?" And she said, "D.C. Stevenson did this to me. He raped me. He beat me. He bit me."
Stevenson!
Most historians truly believe that the murder committed in Indiana was the turning point for the Klan. Klansmen at the grassroots quickly began to learn that this was not what they thought they had joined, and very quickly, we'll call them more respectable members in each community began to distance themselves.
I mean, the case of D.C. Stevenson was a remarkable one because, of course, the Klan had spent most of its history railing on and on about protecting the virtue of white women and chastity and all those good things. So here is essentially the most important Klan leader in the country, who is found guilty of the incredibly savage rape leading to death of a white woman. The rape was so savage, he bit her all over her body. She was torn to pieces, that the woman died several days later, but not before giving a deathbed statement. Ultimately helped to lead to the destruction of the Klan around the country.
What happened in that garage back there was the death of the Klan all over the United States. You have to remember that Stevenson chose the venue for the trial. It was in Noblesville, a heavily Klan area at that time. And 12 white men on that jury listened to her deathbed statement, and they wanted to hang him. The best they could do was second-degree murder, and they gave him second-degree murder and they recommended life. When the mask was stripped away and you saw what these people really were, how ugly they were behind that mask, that's, I think, what makes this spot and this moment in history so important.
Despite the outrage over Stevenson's actions, the Klan continued strongly in the southern states. Its iconic white gowns and hoods, and its cross-lightings and ceremonies attracting an ever-loyal following. Daryl Davis is an author who's written about the Ku Klux Klan. He also has a collection of KKK robes.
This is the robe of an imperial wizard. This is called a mayoke, a blood drop emblem. The red circle, the white cross, and the red blood drop here. And if you look at these black lines here, they form Ks. There are 4 of them, and they stand for Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. The white cross, of course, represents Christianity, and the blood drop means that they will shed their blood to preserve the purity of the white race.
I think, the Klan has the best, uniforms out of all of the fraternal organizations out there. I've looked into masonry and all like that over the years, and I found it quite boring. And with the Klan, it never gets old.
This, of course, is what we call the hood and the mask. Some people call it a helmet in Klan terminology. Well, the Klan traditionally has been a secret society. And while they remain in secrecy, with people not knowing who they are, that can invoke fear in other people. And fear is the most powerful tool to control your enemy. Some people have jobs, and should it be known to their employer that they are a member of a subversive organization, they could lose their job. So it's best that people not know who they are, thus they wear the mask.
Daryl Davis also has the uniform of a Baltimore police officer who was in the Klan.
He was not an undercover police officer in the Klan. He was a bona fide Klan leader on the police force. This is in recent times, just back to the 1970s. The Klan is still thriving, and it's thriving more and more every day with the advent of a black president being in office, with the advent of more and more people coming into this country, immigrants who do not have white skin color. The Klan sees that as a threat. So that's why we're seeing the rise in recruitment efforts. We're seeing the rise in lone wolf attacks, because their thinking is, hey, if the Klan can't do it and the neo-Nazis can't do it, if you want to get it done right, do it yourself.
10,000 white women were raped by a black man. Guess how many black women were raped by a white man? None!
Because the Klan of the 60s was so much a terrorist organization, membership was extremely secret. There was certainly infiltration at certain points by law enforcement, but by and large, in the South, the Klan had very good connections to police departments. So there were police departments like Birmingham, Alabama, that were essentially allies of the Klan. And that was true all around the South. You found very often that police officers would be secretly members of the Klan. It was very much a secret society because, of course, it was engaged in terrorism of the most extreme kind.
The focal point of every Klan gathering for over 100 years has been the lighting of a huge cross. It's a symbol of their strong Christian faith, but it's said to also have a darker meaning.
The cross burnings were usually part of Klan rallies. The cross burnings announced an event. They weren't part of the ritual. The ritual was very much patterned after the ritual of all other organizations at that time, who all were patterned after the Freemasons. And they all followed suit. You rose through levels. You became a goblin. Officers were called things like Kleagles. Their book of ritual was called the Claran. Raising money was called a convocation. And the money was called click token.
The burning of a huge cross is still very much part of KKK ceremonies today. And despite the differences and rivalries between different Klan groups, it's one element they can all agree on.
You accept the light of Christ? Yes, sir.
Klan groups sometimes get together during the year for different occasions. And these are rival groups, but they might have a barbecue, a pig roast, some kind of gathering, and they will have a cross lighting ceremony. It's called a cross lighting when it's done ceremoniously. When it's done as a threat or intimidation, it's called a cross burning. It's kind of a unity and brotherhood, but it's all fake.
Behold the fiery cross, still brilliant. All the troubled history, built to quench its hollow flame.
There's no foundation for it. It's all quicksand, because as soon as they leave, they're still rivals with one another. They don't join forces.
It shall burn bright as morning for all decades.
And then every now and then they'll form a federation of Klan groups. But it's like having 3 chefs in the kitchen. You can't have 3 Imperial wizards in the same Klan group. You know, it's just too much ego, too much power, and they quickly disband.
God give us men. Amen.
Amen. The Ku Klux Klan are the most notorious white supremacist movement in the United States. Once able to boast a membership in the millions, today it has about 5,000 diehard members across the southern states. They meet regularly to don their infamous white robes and hoods and to set fire to enormous crosses. But what does the future hold for the KKK?
The Klan really has been a generational phenomenon. If you think about it in the broadest context, the people who first met in Pulaski had children and grandchildren who would then join the Klan about a generation later. And those people had sons and grandsons who joined the Klan about a generation later. There have been 3 waves and 3, broadly speaking, generations that have attempted to keep the South in its traditional mode. That may be going away today, but there are remnants of it still around.
The Ku Klux Klan finds itself today at a crossroads. Its aims and its racist beliefs appear more out of touch than ever before. In July 2015, the Confederate flag was lowered for the last time outside the state capitol building in Columbia, South Carolina.
They pull the Confederate flag down, but then you got the new Black Panther Party with their monument that they have, and they can openly preach that they want all white people dead. The Ku Klux Klan is not hate. We love our race. We love and believe in the perpetuation and the preservation of the white race. That's what we want.
I'm not sure the Klan will ever die. And that's a sad thing to say. At this point, the membership of the Klan is pretty sad, 5,000 to 8,000 probable. That doesn't count all the organizations that have been spawned by the Klan. The Oklahoma City bombing was carried off by, 3 guys? And essentially one guy caused that kind of grief and death and destruction. So it doesn't take a lot of people to cause social chaos.
We have to face up to the ugly fact that the American South has taken a very long time to recognize the humanity of all black people. And that when the Klan manifests itself in any wave, the reservoir that is underneath white Southerners is often that brutalization of African Americans. The enduring impact of the Ku Klux Klan is that it delayed the true promise of being America, that it kept the American South from truly joining the rest of the nation in a manner and a fashion that would have given it true equality. And in that way, it harmed not just the region, but it harmed the rest of the nation as well.
I think there's just too much history wrapped around the Klan. The Invisible Empire, Knight Riders are sexy and appealing to certain kinds of people. So I think that probably for the foreseeable future, we will have little Klan groups around the United States and elsewhere.
Stop the Klan now! Stop the Klan now!
I've traveled over the world. I've never been to a country that didn't have a race problem. I don't think the Klan will ever die. I just think at this point it's a joke.
All these groups are morphing and diminishing. Are they necessarily going to disappear totally? No, I always believe in the 95%. But what we don't have anymore is the South the Klan really wanted to defend. It's going away.
The KKK has a colorful and violent history, but its actual membership is a small fraction of what it was a century or more ago. The current members rail against what they see as a marginalization of their way of life, and against the huge influx of migrants and a lack of resources for who they see as true white Americans. They threaten that a war is coming where white Americans will take their country back. But increasingly, in this fast-moving, technology-driven, and multicultural world, their old-fashioned and racist views seem woefully outdated and out of touch. And yet the FBI and other law enforcement do recognize the threat that one lone wolf member could still cause. Fueled by hateful ideology and radicalized on the internet, an individual could still perpetrate an act of extreme terror that would grab the entire world's attention and put the KKK back in the headlines. Born from the atomic ashes of World War II, the Japanese Yakuza are one of the most ruthless and feared criminal organizations in the world. They claim to be able to trace their roots back to the time of the samurai, but today are involved in drugs, extortion, gambling, and prostitution.
The Yakuza exists because the public tolerates them some level.
The Japanese have this word Boryokudan, which means violence group.
Violence is a crucial part of our presence.
Make no mistake, the Yakuza will kill people.
The Yakuza are known to be a very violent organization with a history of brutal attacks, beatings, and killings.
Their image is of these noble outlaws that uphold a code of ethics that don't bother the ordinary Japanese person, but if you're in their way or you're not paying the protection money, then you do get killed. A large number of the murders in Japan every year are created by the Yakuza because they're violent groups.
Although the Yakuza are a strictly men-only criminal fraternity, women still play a significant role.
I don't understand why I exist in this world. People tell me you're filthy, disgusting, you should die.
People are going to want drugs, they're going to want access to brothels, all the things that underworld gangs provide that, so-called straight society can't.
There are still incidents now of traditional Yakuza grabbing someone from their street, kidnapping them, taking them somewhere, beating the crap out of them. That things happen all the time.
The Yakuza places over the victim's head, oxygen deprivation, he passes out, he's revived, and then the fun starts again until the Yakuza get what they want.
You're never going to stop crime. It's just a fantasy. The Yakuza will always be there.
The Yakuza are a Japanese crime organization. It's mysterious, secretive, and utterly ruthless, with a fearsome reputation around the world. It's said to be heavily involved in drugs, prostitution, and illegal gambling. Like the mafia, the Yakuza insist on a ruthless code of silence. Any transgressions and the sentence is immediate death. Its numbers are secret, but it's believed to have around 50,000 members today, with 21 different bosses, or Wayabun.
The Yakuza are criminals. They engage in extortion, blackmail, fraud, prostitution, gambling. But almost every Yakuza group has a set of rules, a code of ethics, that prohibit robbing, burglary, sexual assault. And that means that they don't contribute to street crime. And because they don't contribute to street crime, that means if you're walking around this area, you don't feel unsafe, you don't feel like you're gonna get mugged by the Yakuza.
The stereotype is these people who are gaudily dressed and with sunglasses and running around and looking like people you see in movies or TV shows. That's generally not the case. A lot of these guys are dressed just as regular businessmen, decent suit, a white shirt. They will use violence against you unless you comply with their demands.
The Yakuza, they just had this look, they had this edge about them. Maybe they'd be a little scar over the eyebrow or this kind of swagger or glare. You knew who they were.
It's generally believed that modern-day Yakuza gangs were formed in Japan at the end of the Second World War, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been destroyed by atomic bombs.
After the war, when Japan lost, I mean, Tokyo was, for example, was devastated. Half the city was just leveled. You had all these people coming back from the war, and there was no work for them. People were starving to death, and the only thing that kept them in business was the black market. So people naturally gravitated towards crime.
What used to be common was a protection racket, where the Yakuza will come in, they'll say, hey, nice place you have here. We'd hate to see somebody mess it up. So why don't you pay the Yakuza a certain amount?
They get their money, you get some kind of tangible reward, and you get the added benefits of having a sort of on-call security service. In the old days, that wasn't a bad deal.
But who actually runs the Yakuza today? Its 50,000 members are said to be run by a small star chamber of ruling bosses, known as the Wayabun.
And there are 21 different Yakuza organizations, and each one has a sort of different structure, but basically they're all pyramid. And they're structured as a kind of all-male family. There are no females in the Yakuza, not many females with any power. So you have at the top of each part of the pyramid, the Oyabun, that is the father figure. Under him are the oldest brother and all the other children. Depending upon where you are in the Yakuza group, you pledge allegiance to the Oyabun, or you pledge allegiance to the older brother. There are also brother-brother ties within the organization. It's very fraternal, it's very patriarchal, and it is meant to be a family kind of structure.
Everybody starts on the bottom, they work their way up. They can start as early as teenagers. First, they're loose associates, and they earn their positions, and they give them positions of more responsibility as they perform better. And now, as far as performance, that means money. See, a Yakuza must pay dues to his organization to belong. Those who cannot produce a profit are usually shown the door.
Authority is absolute from the top down. You're never supposed to speak back to your elders or dispute your boss. There's this famous Yakuza saying, which is, if the Oyabun says the passing crow is white, it's white.
The Yakuza would often say, we're not like the mafia. We have a certain code of honor. We have loyalty to the bosses. We don't bother the average person in the street. We provide services for society, you know, we keep the crazies and psychos off the street. There's a certain truth to this, but at the same time, these guys are also criminals, you know, and there's some really nasty people and they do some horrible things.
Their image is of these noble outlaws that uphold a code of ethics that don't bother the ordinary Japanese person, but if you're in their way or you're not paying the protection money, then you do get killed. A large number of the murders in Japan every year are created by the Yakuza because they're violent groups.
But how powerful is the Yakuza in Japanese society today? American journalist Jake Adelstein is one of the world's leading authorities on their activities and history. He has spent years investigating the Yakuza and has received several death threats. His book on his exploits, Tokyo Vice, has become a bestseller.
From 1999 to 2000, this was my area. I was on the police beat. This area was wonderfully sleazy when I first started. In the 90s, you would have touts on the street, scantily clad women, incredibly brazen advertisements for the various sexual services out here. It was insane. This will take us past what used to be the meeting place for all the local thugs. The Furin Kaikan is famous. There was a time, like in the 90s, when you would go into the Furin Kaikan and see an incredible assemblage of thugs and people with tattoos and missing fingers and things.
Are Yakuza very visible here? Or?
I wouldn't use the word, the Y word here because it makes people nervous.
Some Yakuza are very smart and charming, very sophisticated. I mean, there are all sorts of levels. I mean, there are guys you'll see who wear, you know, Brioni suits, speak English. But on the other end, there are guys that can't get a good job anywhere, just troublemakers, but they have muscle, and so they join gangs. And the gangs use that muscle when necessary, like collecting loans.
This on your right, coming up, is the Shinjuku police box. This is the most busy police box in any place in Japan. You can see the police car over there.
The police have a strange relationship with the Yakuza in many cases. Many times these guys grew up together as kids. Some end up as police officers, some end up as Yakuza. But they know each other. They're in constant contact with the Yakuza. They're often exchanging information as well to better society, as they both believe. For example, if there's a case where there's a murder, it happened on Yakuza turf, the police want to know about it, the Yakuza will generally cooperate with something like that because they don't want that kind of petty crime or bad stuff in their turf either. At the same time, unfortunately, every police force out there has some dirty cops. In the past, some police officers have been arrested for passing information that they should not have to Yakuza friends. And sometimes the police are in debt to Yakuza due to their patronage of illegal Yakuza gambling establishments, for example. And then they're extorted to provide information about the rival gang members or on police operations.
When someone gets killed in Japan and it's a homicide, it's a big deal and it's national news. The police have to set up a special investigative division to take care of a murder because it's a serious crime.
To catch a killer before he kills again. A huge operation to track down the person responsible for at least one death, and perhaps more.
It's sort of a mutual agreement that there are certain areas that the cops will enforce, and there are certain areas that they'd rather have the Yakuza enforce. They will defend their own turf. They will not tolerate petty crimes in their area that gives their businesses or the businesses that are under protection any kind of negative effects.
See these guys all over here on your right? That's the aura of mob. I mean, you're seeing a lot of black cars and black Mercedes here and guys sort of hovering around. There's definitely something going on. You can probably safely assume that they are local yucks. This is a nerve-wracking place. This isn't a place you go to relax. The competition is fierce here. Every gang has its own little fiefdom here, and you don't want to step on somebody's shoes.
They have this really ugly, violent side. People who wind up in Yakuza organizations are people who can't function. They have violent tempers and they can't control them, so they have to join an organization where the boss is so powerful that he can, control them.
We're going to stop here, but we're kind of in an area that's still really controlled by numerous factions of the Yakuza, and they really don't like being photographed. Also, the police are very concerned about projecting the right image of this area, so we may get stopped and we may be asked not to film, and people may be angry with us, but we'll go ahead and take that chance.
The Japanese Yakuza is one of the most infamous and feared criminal organizations in the world. It's said to be secretive and utterly ruthless, with a fearsome reputation. It's said to be heavily involved in drugs, prostitution, and illegal gambling. But how powerful is the Yakuza in Japanese society today? American journalist Jake Adelstein is one of the world's leading authorities on them. He spent years investigating the Yakuza and has received several death threats.
This is Kabukicho, the heart of Shinjuku, like Japan's oldest red light district. You can get anything you want here, booze, weird fetish outfits. You can also get ripped off and have your life savings stripped from you if you go to the wrong bar.
If a tourist is just there in Shinjuku to enjoy the sights, drink in a few bars, eat at some restaurants, generally they will not encounter the Yakuza. Well, the Yakuza will come out when it's time to defend their turf, or sometimes they'll be out as a show of force, patrol the area.
I've had threats from one individual and his men. I've had angry words exchanged with 2 or 3 Yakuza over the years. But I mean, that's kind of how they are, right? They make threats, they yell at you, they say they're gonna kill you. It's kind of like how you and I would say good morning to each other. If they really want to kill you, they're not gonna threaten you, they'll just do it.
Like the mafia, the Yakuza insist on a ruthless code of silence. Hiroki Allen is a security consultant who has worked with many of the world's leading governments, advising them on combating the Yakuza.
In Japan, laws forbid private citizens from owning most weapons. No firearms, no blades. You cannot carry these. The Yakuza know their victims are unarmed, so they can just use brute force, mass numbers. If they grab somebody off the street and they're torturing him, they can use anything from advanced techniques to very simple stuff, such as like placing a pen or a pencil between the victim's fingers and squeezing his hand very hard, cause intense pain, doesn't leave any marks that they can take back to the police and say that they were actually physically assaulted. They will most likely be complying with the Yakuza's wishes after some time with them.
Allen agreed to recreate some actual Yakuza torture techniques on camera.
The Yakuza wants money from a victim like this. We don't want to leave scars that he can report as being assaulted to the police, because that could bring the heat on us. So we want to cause terror, we want to cause pain, and also to get him to pay up. Here's a very common comb. This snapping action into the eyeball causes intense pain, but leaves no external scar. We can continue this for as long as we want until we get this guy to agree to sign the document we want. Over here, under all this, we have a plastic bag. You've all heard of waterboarding, but there's no need to use any water if you have one of these. You come over here, the Yakuza will place this over the victim's head or hold over his face. Oxygen deprivation, he passes out, he's revived, and then the fun starts again until the Yakuza get what they want. He's already angered the Yakuza enough to have them actually take him away and confine him like this. He knows he has one chance to get out of here alive. If he doesn't do what the Yakuza want this time, well, he'll find himself buried in a hillside or thrown into the ocean, and he'll never be seen again. Frankly, the victim has no idea when these tortures will stop, how much more they'll escalate. Just the mere sight of these tools here will strike serious fear into his heart and get him to comply. That's the aim.
Traditionally, extortion was the bread and butter of the Yakuza. And it works like this. You open a bar or you open a restaurant, the gang members will come to your office or come to your bar and tell you, you're operating in our territory. It would be advisable for you to pay an honorarium so that you can do business here. We will protect you from other Yakuza organizations harassing your business. You might be leasing flowers from the Yakuza. You pay them an exorbitant amount of fees. There are some times when paying off the Yakuza is a good business investment. Not only do you keep them out of your business, but when you have an unruly customer that you can't get rid of, they will come much faster than the police.
Like the mafia, the Yakuza is made up of hundreds of small and mid-sized gangs who are constantly fighting over money, drugs, prostitutes, and of course, turf. The battles are bloody and brutal.
Every so often, two gangs will move into the same territory. There'll be an argument, and there'll be a shootout, there'll be a fight. You know, guns are illegal in Japan. If you're caught with a gun, you know, you can go to prison for several years. They're very serious.
The Yakuza know not to carry firearms around because if they are accosted by police, they're going straight to prison. If they're carrying blades, yes, that's the same thing. So many times they'll carry innocuous-looking items that may not qualify as weapons. For example, a drink in a glass bottle.
They don't walk around with weapons. The number of shooting incidences involving the Yakuza is extremely rare. Last year, the number of shooting deaths in Japan was 6 people. That's in a nation of 127 million people. And I think that's like, 1 hour in the United States.
Firearms. The mere sight of these will cause panic. The Yakuza don't have unlimited supply of ammunition. So there are reports that many times they are taught to use these as contact range weapons. They can grab the victim, pull them in, put the muzzle against them, and shoot. This not only ensures a hit, also the expanding gases coming in the barrel go into the body, causing a much more lethal effect. Impact weapons. Collapsible baton. These, actually the police use these as well, so the Yakuza are quite familiar with these. Now granted, you're not supposed to be carrying these around, they're supposed to be for martial arts practice uses, but many Yakuza do use these. This will break bones on contact. A very effective short-range impact weapon.
Make no mistake, the Yakuza will kill people, but they're very judicious about it, and it's a business decision. It's not something that's done in a hot rage. I mean, an assassination, when they take out a civilian, the calculation is that the greater benefit of the group is worth the bad publicity and the heat from the police you'll get from killing someone. And sometimes they kill someone and stage it as a suicide. Everyone knows that they were probably whacked, but they don't want the police to crack down on them. They don't want any of their people to go to jail. And the message still gets across.
The Yakuza really had become involved in all aspects of society, from narcotics business, prostitution, gambling, protection, on up the scale through real estate, the stock market, and construction and legitimate businesses. The Japanese Yakuza and the police had quite an intimate relationship. In the early days of the late 40s and early 50s, they had no power, and so they needed the support of the Yakuza to fight off this communist movement in Japan. But Yakuza and police, basically speaking, even today, come from the same culture. You either grew up to be a Yakuza or a policeman. The police would set up a judo hall, and they'd try to recruit the youths and teach them judo and make them sympathetic to the police cause. And then you'd have the Yakuza bosses who would, take them to baseball games and try to recruit them into the gangs. Or you had your choice of going one way or the other, but a lot of these people are boyhood friends, And still, even today, you see them. They'll get together behind the scenes, and they need to keep the channels of communication open in order to control crime.
One of the sure signs of someone being a member of the Yakuza is a missing little finger. Many members cut off portions of or the entire finger as a mark of yubitsumi, or apology. Shintaro Hayashi's company makes prosthetic fingers, among other body parts, and is in demand from former Yakuza members who are looking to replace their missing digits.
Yakuza come here for various reasons, often when they want to get out of the Yakuza for regular community. There are possibly feeling that because of the lack of fingers, people feel scared. So they quite often hold the hands like this. So it's hidden and people don't notice it. I've been in this business, this place, for 13 years, and I've made fingers for about 50 Yakuzas, but I've never counted properly. But possibly 500 to 600 fingers for Yakuza I made.
It scares the crap out of people to see someone missing a finger. It's like, if this guy's gonna cut off his own finger, and it's not like you see in some bad movies where someone holds the guy down and cuts off the finger against their will. That's sort of, I think, a popular conception. If you screw up in the Yakuza, that you get held down, they chop off your finger. No, you do it yourself.
If you walk into a golf course and say, I want to play 18 holes, and you have a missing fingertip, they won't let you. So that's why some doctors have set up a business making prosthetic fingertips. It looks quite real. You can't really tell.
Now, there's two reasons that Yakuza used to chop off their fingers. One is that you chop off your finger because someone under you has screwed up, and you are atoning for their mistake and asking for the boss's forgiveness. When you chop off your finger for someone else, which is an altruistic act, that's considered a living finger, ikyubi. When you chop off your finger because you've screwed up, then that's called a dead finger, right? You might get forgiven of your debt, you might be allowed to stay in the organization, but it's nowhere nearly as cool as doing it for someone else.
The Yakuza world, that's the ultimate way to apologize. I couldn't imagine cutting my finger off. It takes an enormous amount of courage. There's a certain way that they do it. They take a knife and they'll stick it in the table, and then in one sharp movement, they'll get right at the joint. And if you're really good at it, it's done really fast.
Either way, it's not an easy thing to do, but it intimidates people. And you're a Yakuza, and someone sees the tats, they see the missing finger, they know that you're probably not afraid of pain, and if they're afraid of physical violence, they're liable to back away.
The Yakuza are a mysterious, secretive, and utterly ruthless Japanese crime organization with a fearsome reputation around the world. It's said to be heavily involved in drugs, prostitution, and illegal gambling, and like the mafia, insist on a ruthless code of silence. Any transgressions, and the sentence is immediate death. Tattoos are a way of life for all Yakuza, denoting both their life stories and their positions within the complicated hierarchy. Mr. Horyu has been inking Yakuza members for many years.
We have a long history of tattoos and a very special, peculiar kind of design with color and also patterns. It has very unique position in our culture.
Traditionally, when you get tattooed, you were saying goodbye to the civilian life because Japanese really discriminate against tattooed people. So you're sort of saying, to hell with being a normal person, I am dedicated to this organization. So that's one meaning. And often, young Yakuza would have the name of their organization tattooed on their body, sometimes even the name of their Oyabun, their Yakuza father. That's corporate branding taken to the extreme because once you have your organization tattooed on your body, it's very hard to change jobs or organizations.
The tattoos are a sign that you belong to a certain gang. You have a certain design, a dragon on your back. It's a very painful process. It takes quite a while. It's another kind of rite of passage.
Traditionally, the tattooing was done with blunt needles and literally gouging into the flesh so deeply that it destroys the epidermis. It's painful. There's a lot of blood. And by getting a tattoo, especially an ornate tattoo, you are showing the world that you are a tough guy. This is how much pain I can endure. And other Yakuza, seeing the depth of your tattoos and how finely colored it might be, are going to assess, wow, this is someone who can take a lot of pain.
There are a lot of establishments that won't let Yakuza in. Public baths, golf courses, some restaurants, nightclubs will have signs out there that say no Boryokudan allowed, which is kind of ironic since in many of those cases they're owned by Boryokudan.
Shoko Tendo is the daughter of a high-ranking Yakuza boss. She has seen the organization from the inside out, and she doesn't like it.
We had people coming into our house with tattoos or without a little finger. My father himself had tattoos too. When I saw that guests called my father Oyabun, basically boss, I realized that at quite an early age, he was a member. If you are a Yakuza wife, your man calls you Mrs. They appear to kind of be nice to you, but that tradition works out only when your boss is with you.
The Yakuza's loyalty is to his organization above all else. If it means offering up his daughter or a family member to pay back a debt, he doesn't think about it twice. He looks at his organization ties as being more important. Yakuza view women as commodities, something to be traded, something that has value. They don't look at them generally as human beings.
When Shoko was 16, her father owed money to another Yakuza boss. A proposition was then put to her.
If you want to pay off your father's debts, then you know what will be required. It was unspoken, but of course he was implying that I would have to be his mistress. I knew that my father's debts were quite a lot, and that's not something that he could really fully pay back. So I really didn't want to become his mistress, but I had no choice. He was treating me as if I was his possession, and he also got me on drugs, and he was just trying to control me. But he also knew that he couldn't have my feelings, and he was frustrated. That's why he was so abusive with me.
I would never recommend becoming a mistress to the Yakuza. It's a terrible life. Now, you might have some Yakuza boyfriends that are decent human beings, but generally speaking, Yakuza use the women in their lives to make money. They're means to an end.
Like many people connected to the Yakuza, Shoko felt the desire to have extensive tattoo work.
I always wanted to have tattoos when I was little, because the people around me who treated me very viciously, like my father or his men, and they all had tattoos. And maybe my time is that over there, you know, the best time that we had. As a child, I was thinking for when I grow up that I'm going to have tattoos. I also thought, when I have tattoos, then I will be complete for the first time as a human being.
In many ways, good and bad, the Yakuza society is a reflection of traditional Japanese values. First of all, it's incredibly misogynist and sexist. There are no female Yakuza. Japan has this word danson johi, respect the male and disrespect the female. And you certainly see that in Yakuza society, where women are only seen as commodities, are at best somebody that helps support the big boss.
The Yakuza are the infamous and all-powerful Japanese crime organization with a fearsome reputation around the world. It's said to be heavily involved in drugs, prostitution, and illegal gambling, and maintains a ruthless code of silence. Any transgressions, and the sentence is immediate death. It's believed to have around 50,000 members today and about 21 different bosses, or wayabun. Yakuza members are notoriously media shy. They rarely give interviews and hate being filmed or photographed. However, we got one member to agree to talk to us, provided we don't reveal his identity in any way.
We are regarded as a necessary unit of society. I'm in the middle rank. I have been in this business for nearly 20 years. We have our own belief or faith. If the seniors give us order, we do as much as possible and follow this order. Always the danger or a threat is being around day by day, and I sometimes just seek for the danger by myself, to step into it, to get it, but I do it.
It's very hard to identify Yakuza on the street these days because there's pressure from the police, so they're being forced underground.
The Yakuza have generally made a lot of money from extortion, prostitution, gambling, and they're also taking protection money from a lot of the businesses in the area.
I think the current estimate of Yakuza numbers is close to 40,000. That's probably downplaying the number that are still in business, but the police have done a good job of driving lower-ranking members out of the business or into jail.
It's now over a week since the head of an 11-year-old boy was found outside the gates of a junior high school in Kobe.
The number of official Yakuza keeps going down, but crime keeps going up. Somebody's committing the crimes, and just take a wild guess, and I would say that these are former members of Yakuza groups that are working as freelance or working in a different capacity.
It isn't easy to be a proper member. There are several years of being apprentice with a trainee kind of status, then to be recognized and to be received as a full member and go up the hierarchy. It's about doing a good job and business or to commit something, to go to the prison. Violence is a crucial part of our existence. We have to commit something and be imprisoned for that.
Despite being secretive and camera shy, the Yakuza feature heavily in their own comic books, which are on sale to the public. They depict their history, as well as news of recent events, arrests, and even deaths.
So this is a Yakuza fanzine. It'll tell you what's happening in the industry, who's moving up, who's moving down. This is a picture of the Inagawa Kai. Notice they're all in their traditional Japanese dress. Everyone knows the head of the Yamaguchi-gumi. It's not like these people are unknown. So if you look at the table of contents here, There's interviews with members of the Inagawa Kai. There are letters from people in prison. There's a quick roundup of who's been arrested. So you can see if your buddy's in jail or not, or when he might be getting out. It must appear as kind of insane, right? This magazine itself has 221 pages. Imagine going to the bookstore in the United States and buying, Crips Monthly, which would give you, 200 pages of what's happening with the Crips. People who are reading this stuff are the same people that read historical novels in Japan. I mean, it's your middle-class, white-collar salaryman, or maybe blue-collar guys as well. They're reading it and they're thinking about a time when if you had guts and brains and daring, you could be a successful gang boss and that people would admire you.
Manabu Miyazaki is a writer who's long been a figure connected with the Yakuza. He has always denied being a member, but the rumors persist, and he's become what he calls a freelance Yakuza in Japan. He explains the importance of the sake ceremony within Yakuza circles.
Because the Yakuza is a kind of imaginary family, ceremonies are very important for the Yakuza. Because doing this ceremony establishes the relationships of the person, to not ever be betrayed. So in a way, he cannot get away from the Yakuza community. For that reason, they spend a lot of money to conduct the ceremonies. And have the sake confirms the relations. And make a strong pledge.
Miyazaki explains that when you're in or associated with the Yakuza, it's a dark, dangerous business where you always have to be watching over your shoulder. To illustrate the point, Miyazaki himself was shot in a gangland attack in 1986.
I went to the restaurant, dinner with all my friends, just having a meal and some negotiations. Then the hitman came in and shot me. One of the bullets hit my body. When I was shot, I just felt hot. Not much pain, actually. Then it gradually came. These last 30 years have always been tense. I cannot be relaxed at any moment. You have to stay alert to stay alive.
So when gang war escalates, it can really escalate into a bloody mess. But the Yakuza exists because the public tolerates to them some level. So when you start having shootouts in the streets and innocent people get killed, that results in stronger laws, police crackdowns, lots of arrests. So it's bad business to have a gang war. And as the Yakuza become more financially savvy and laws in Japan have changed to make it so that the top dogs can be sued for any crime committed by the lower level Yakuza things, they're less prone to use violence because it's costly.
Many times the Yakuza will use an indirect approach to get their message across. So instead of attacking the actual principal, they'll attack a close family member, someone who means a lot to them, to send a message. Now, to get to this level, they've most likely warned verbally or maybe in a written way. If they don't follow the arguments, then they put the Yakuza into a position where they must defend their turf. And this is where the violent acts may occur.
They'll start out with a midnight knock on the door. We've come to collect our money. They'll just scare the bejesus out of you. They'll start calling you in the middle of the night. They could beat you up. They could kill you. They could, make your daughter come work for one of their nightclubs or the houses of one of their brothels.
In an extreme case, in the past, the Yakuza have found people who will not comply with their wishes. So in order to make an example of them, they'll send guys out to grab them, put them in a car, take them to a remote location, and torture and kill them.
The Yakuza are the biggest and most powerful Japanese crime organization. They are extremely secretive and utterly ruthless, with a fearsome reputation around the world. They are said to be heavily involved in drugs, prostitution, and illegal gambling. And like the mafia, the Yakuza insist on a ruthless code of silence. Any transgressions, and you die. It's believed to have around 50,000 members today and about 21 different bosses, are Wayabun. The Yakuza has dominated the Japanese media for most of the 20th century. But what does the future hold for this mysterious organization? And is it, as some say, slowly losing its edge and control of events?
Japan is one law away from wiping out the Yakuza, and that would be a Criminal Conspiracy Act. A Criminal Conspiracy Act would allow the Japanese police to seize the property of the Yakuza bosses, take down their offices, take down their businesses, take away all their assets, and put everyone in jail. But the police and the Yakuza sometimes become friends in a sense. They share personal knowledge of each other. They might go drinking. There might be camaraderie. If the Yakuza boss steps over the line and there's some friendship involved, maybe the police are less likely to let it slide or convince the person making the complaint to let the charges go. There's this idea that it's better the enemy you know than the enemy you don't know. Because everyone would like to deal with someone that is reasonable, that they know better, rather than someone they don't know at all.
The Japanese police have instituted a number of anti-gang laws in the past 20 years, and most recently, there's a pretty intensive crackdown in which you can't do business with any individuals associated with organized crime. Any member of a gang cannot hold a bank account any longer. That's pretty serious stuff. I think that's part of that, I think, is the influence of the United States, because they see the U.S. government cracking down on the gangs, that the police feel they need to do something more or something at the same time.
Japan only needs to do three things to get rid of the Yakuza. They need a criminal conspiracy law, they need to allow plea bargaining, they need to allow undercover investigations. They won't do it for a few reasons. One is, this administration has so many Yakuza ties that trying to get rid of the Yakuza can only be bad news for them. Also, they need the Yakuza to run the nuclear power plants. No one wants to do those jobs, and the only people that are managed to find labor that will do the jobs is the Yakuza.
The shame of Yakuza we have nowadays is lost. Of course, there will be always different forms, and they will go underground, and those groups always remain in any age. But what we call Yakuza now are antisocial groups. I don't think they are going to last because the government has implemented more severe laws. If a normal person does something, they say fine. If you're a Yakuza, then they start taking the person more seriously than the other person. And they treat the Yakuza not really like humans, so they cannot survive.
The police crackdown on the Yakuza has been widespread and extensive over the last few years, with a number of bosses and foot soldiers arrested and sent to jail. After years of holding the country in the grip of its power, it does seem as if the Yakuza's iron fist is loosening a little. In many ways, Japanese society is now embarrassed by the images of the old crime bosses and their obedient thugs with tattoos and missing fingers, just as the influence of the mafia has sharply declined in the United States. It's just not that cool to be in the Yakuza anymore. The mystique and dark appeal has faded in recent years, and yet to many, these ruthless underground gangs remain a potent force in Japanese society, suppliers of drugs, loans, and prostitutes. And the success of the Yakuza comic books proves that to those in that world, and to those who want to be part of it, their mix of violence, sex, gambling, and drugs is as alluring as ever.
Japan doesn't want to have this sort of spectacle of semi-public organized crime groups that no other country has. You know, what other country has Yakuza fanzines? You can't go to England or Australia and buy Mafia Monthly. So when you have organized crime members existing in public and with impunity, it makes Japan look bad.
The Yakuza will always be there, whether they're as members of formally organized groups or in some other form. I mean, there'll always be criminals in every society.
To catch a killer before he kills again. A huge operation to track down the person responsible for at least one death
They provide a service. They answer needs of society that other institutions can't provide. People are always going to need somebody, say, to collect a loan that nobody wants to pay. People are going to want drugs. They're going to want access to brothels. All the things that underworld gangs provide that, so-called straight society can't.
The Yakuza would like to survive because they don't know any better. I mean, you take a guy who's in his 30s or 40s, who's tattooed, he's missing a finger, what the hell is he going to do in Japan? The number of Yakuza that are successfully integrated into society after leaving the Yakuza are less than 10%. The number of successful cases that the police can claim of reforming Yakuza is abysmally low. And that's going to be a real problem for Japan. Technically, they've reduced the numbers by half of what they were 4 or 5 years ago. But where are these Yakuza going? What will they do? When they get out of prison, what jobs will they find? And with no discipline and no organization to go to, they'll probably turn to violent crime because that's all they know.
You're never going to stop crime. It's just a fantasy. Always be there. The Yakuza will always be there.
Despite constant media speculation about their future, the Yakuza remain a dominant force in Japan today. According to police estimates, the number of members is said to be half of what it was. But make no mistake, it still has a very real presence in cities like Tokyo and Kyoto. And it still has its fingers in all types of crime: extortion, gambling, and prostitution. But as the Japanese government cracks down on them, many former Yakuza members released from jail find it hard to live a straight life, often returning to crime. The Yakuza have a long, dark, and violent history, and like the mafia in the United States, are ingrained in the very fabric of society. Their numbers and popularity might be declining, but they're not done yet. The Nazis and the occult, the hidden influences that ran deep through Hitler's race for power, are now revealed.
The Nazis had built for themselves an entire universe of beliefs, some of it factual, some of it semi-factual, some of it from planet Mars. And the more you study the Nazis, the more it's like science fiction.
What were the mysterious occult Nazi societies at the heart of the Third Reich?
Key members of the Nazi Party, in particular Himmler and Hitler, were not just a little into the occult, they were absolutely obsessed by it.
What's incredible is how influential the secret societies were on the creation of the Third Reich.
These ideas of occultism, spiritualism, and racism made for a toxic blend.
Is it true that the Nazis had a top-secret program to build flying saucers and UFOs?
Did the Nazis take the blueprints to build these round flying machines?
We have UFOs, rocket launching factories built underground.
There appears to have been one successful flight. Short, not very far, but still a successful test flight.
And were there plans to build a genetically pure white super race?
The Nazis stole babies, and they were brought up in the hands of people who would Germanicize them. That was the master plan. This is crazy stuff. It's way ahead of its time. It's because world domination is the goal, and it's just a shame it was driven by evil.
The Nazis were a powerful, dominant force across Europe and North Africa in the mid-20th century. Led by the charismatic Adolf Hitler, they rampaged through country after country, leading to the greatest conflict this world has ever known, the Second World War. But behind the huge parades and overwhelming military power, the Nazis had a strong belief in ancient mysticism, magic, and the occult. There were two secret societies at the core of these esoteric beliefs, whose members were at the very top of the German high command, including the second in command to the Führer, Heinrich Himmler.
So Himmler had a vision of having a center where men could come and become true Germans, really the sort of Aryan race that he had envisioned.
It was melded to the idea that this was their destiny, tied up with the old Germanic gods demanding that they do this.
This was a monument to the Völkisch beliefs that founded the SS.
This just wasn't textbook stuff. They were meditating. They were having seances. This is where they learned how to be the Germans of the past and the Germans of the future.
The site for Himmler's secret Nazi project was Wewelsburg Castle in northeastern Germany. It was originally built back in the 10th century, then added to and adapted over the centuries before the infamous SS moved in the 1930s and turned it into the stronghold that still stands today.
The plans for Wewelsburg Castle was for it to be the center of the Germanic ideology for hundreds of years into the future. Himmler spent a good couple of years with the help of concentration camp workers building Wewelsburg into his vision, adding ritual crypts beneath the North Tower in the design of a beehive hut that they felt was symbolic for all sorts of reasons.
Theo Pymans is a Dutch researcher and historian who is an expert on Nazi secret societies. He believes that Wewelsburg was at the heart of the Nazis' esoteric and occult beliefs.
Himmler and his generals needed places for the development of their own esoterical philosophies. The SS had a number of castles, and they called them Ordensburgen. Translation of that is castles of the order. And each castle would have a specific function in order to train the generals and the high officers of the SS. But this castle was the premier Ordensburg, the premier castle of the order, and only a select few would come here.
The Nazis used Wewelsburg as a training center for elite members of the SS. Around a dozen or so high-ranking officers would spend time here, immersed in secret rituals, pagan worship, and paying homage to the sacred northern gods.
Wewelsburg Castle was the home of the ultimate secret society. The SS was the ultimate secret society. Their very symbol. A lot of people think it's just a fashionable design for SS. It's a rune. They took classes in runes. They took classes in these beliefs.
This is where you would come if you were in the upper echelon of the Nazi party and you were being groomed for bigger and better things. This is where the rituals would take place. I mean, this is not a place they created. This is a place they modified. Everything about Wewelsburg is symbolic and is designed for the elite of German society.
Had Nazi Germany won the war, Wewelsburg would only be a small part in a huge complex of what was to be the ultimate training school of Himmler's esoterical SS. This was not to be a training school for the soldier, this was a training school for the elite of the SS.
This whole concept of striving for the higher man, the more evolved man, and they didn't just mean on the physical level, they meant literally on the psychological level. And they believed that through using these various techniques, they could raise the human race to a higher level.
All of the rituals in Wewelsburg Castle was basically to instill this military, regimented ideas into their heads, that they obeyed orders, they obeyed the Führer, they had no thoughts or feelings of their own. They were in themselves each the perfect Aryan warrior.
We have one eyewitness account of a person who is inside this castle, who stumbles upon a room, who inadvertently opens the door and sees there 12 of his SS generals sitting there in strict silence and meditation. It's one of those rare glimpses that we see what Himmler really was about.
So these people were thought leaders, but they were also really into ritual, and that ritual included things like seances and included different ways of communing, whether that be drugs or just ordinary rituals to try to access information from other realms.
Heinrich Himmler was an active occultist and took an intense and very personal interest in what went on at Wewelsburg. He visited the castle at every opportunity.
Himmler would arrive across the gate. He would enter with the car and his generals. The car would stop here. Himmler would enter, leave the car. There would be an orchestra, there would be his generals, there would be soldiers, there would be a ceremony. Himmler would have been greeted, and then he probably would have gone through that door inside the main hall, where there is a very important and secret symbol, which is still here today. The inner core of the SS was always very secretive about what it did here in this hall in the castle of Wewelsburg. And even today, we don't know for sure what it was that they did here. We have a slight inkling, and that has to do with the symbolism of the number 12. There are 12 pillars, and there are 12 Sieg runes. So we may assume that the group that gathered here would be 12, including Himmler, making it 13, the unholy number 13.
The most sacred symbol to the SS was the black sun, which they worshipped here at Wewelsburg. The sun is represented by the wheel shape on the floor, which gives off a purple afterglow.
The black sun comes from the idea of the hollow earth. Within the hollow earth, there is a power source, because without an external sun, you can't grow crops, you can't survive. Some see the swastika as a symbol of the black sun, of the energy, this black energy. It's the antithesis of the sun.
So the mindset of the people in Germany around the start of the 20th century, when these societies were being formed, is really no different than it was anywhere else in Europe. For about 50, 100 years now, there's been a slow buildup of interest in the occult and interest in the people who can talk to other realms, and that information was actually quite credible.
Downstairs under the main chamber is a crypt personally designed by Himmler himself to his specifications. It was here, it's thought, that the most intimate and powerful secret society ceremonies took place.
This space is the crypt beneath the North Tower in Wewelsburg, and this was to be Himmler's center of the world. Now, had the Nazis won the war, we could only imagine what kind of rituals they might have held here. This was built before and during the Second World War. Construction stopped in 1943 because of the defeat of the Nazis at Stalingrad. Now, we don't know what this crypt may have been used for, but we could imagine certain things. And one of the things that people say is that highly ranked SS generals would be cremated here, and the urns with their ashes would be standing alongside the wall. So this was to be Himmler's, center of the world, where he would keep his most trusted and loyal SS generals even after death.
At the end of the war, Himmler gave instructions to blow up and destroy Wewelsburg Castle, not wanting the Allies to find out its secrets. But the team tasked to do this had far too little explosives to do the job, and the castle was spared, only to be sacked and pillaged by local people after Germany surrendered. The Nazis were deep into all sorts of ancient beliefs and occult rituals. They even restored a medieval castle, Wewelsburg, in northern Germany, to house the holy relics that they were searching for across the world, like the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. Himmler and others saw themselves as descendants of the Great White Knights, whose destiny was to rule the world. Michael Fitzgerald is an author and historian who is an expert on Nazi occult activities and secret societies. He spent decades investigating and researching one of the most powerful groups, the Thule Society, and their activities.
The Thule Society was occult overtones, but they were always primarily politically orientated. They wanted to make their racist and nationalist dreams come true through using occult methods, among other things.
There was all this foment of a strange romantic mixture of medieval Grail stories, Germanic folklore and bits of science fiction, all melded together with politics and with this huge desire to pull themselves out of this morass of well, kind of stagnation and despair that the German people were in, behind somebody who would be a focus.
You're walking a fine line here in terms of occult beliefs and occult societies and hidden and secret societies. When you're talking about societies like Thule, are they secret societies? Yes. Are they occult societies? Are they esoteric? Well, that depends on the society. That depends on what their purpose for existence is.
The Thule Society visualized their enemies as dead, and they used this technique to considerable extent. That was their primary thing that they tried to do. Obviously, they also used physical means to try and encourage that, and they did do a great number of murders themselves.
The Thule Society members included the ruling elite of the Nazi Party at the time, including well-known philosophers Alfred Rosenberg and Dietrich Eckart.
Eckart believed that the material world was evil and it was our duty to escape from it. So he and Rosenberg were very much on that wavelength. They believed in a higher spiritual realm that it was our duty to aspire towards. Their perception of that world was very bizarre because they thought human suffering on this realm was unimportant. This was the realm of illusion. The realm of reality was up there.
They believed that their ancestors lived underground and were ruling the world from underneath the ground. And when the time is right, they would come back and make their rightful claim to society and rule the world above ground once more.
The Four Seasons Hotel in Munich was one of the main meeting places for another important Nazi secret society, known as the Vril. Like the Thule Society, their members were the leading lights in the Nazi Party. About a dozen men would meet together in total secrecy to carry out the secret agenda and rituals of the society. In the late 1930s, this would have included plans to take over and rule the world.
The term vril actually came from, a novel written in the 19th century by the novelist Lord Lytton called The Coming Race. He had this concept of underground dwellers who lived beneath the earth, and they had this power called vril.
This ancient culture, very advanced technological culture, is displaced by a cataclysm and is forced to flee the surface of the earth and creates a world within the earth powered by a black sun. People believe that there was a doorway into this hidden world in the North and South Pole, that it was possible to get into this great subterranean cities.
That attracted these guys who actually literally believed that vril existed and was a real power that could be manifested and used to achieve domination over people and even domination over the material world.
It's all there. It's all there in his books that were admired by these high Nazi leaders. Vril as a power, as a life source. They totally bought into this.
The idea of this extraordinary force that was sort of almost occult, it was mysterious, but it was very real in its outcome. It appealed to the German people and certain thinkers in particular.
Andrew Goff has found evidence of a top-secret Vril Society meeting that took place outside Munich before the war. What occurred was truly bizarre.
So imagine the scene, deep in the Bavarian forest, in a country house. Here, the event that would serve as the genesis for the formation of the most evil society in modern times would be a seance. In attendance are representatives of the elite from Munich, but more importantly, all the secret societies are there. Thule, Vril, Brothers of the Black Stone, and the Black Sun, which is sort of the elite of the Thule Society. The atmosphere of the night would have been tense. The ambiance would have been full of anticipation. Just who was going to be this mysterious guest? Who is this? Who is this woman in the black veil? She would reveal that she has been in contact with a planet called Aldebaran, which is 64 light years away in the constellation of Taurus. And she's already channeled information in 2 different languages, one of which appears to be a German Templar script, but the other is ancient Sumerian. And what they present to the group is that they have been given a blueprint for an advanced spacecraft that uses free energy. They would call it Vril energy.
According to records, documents, and declassified footage from the time, the Nazis took this connection to UFOs very seriously, even, it said, building their own flying craft.
But from 1933 onwards, they gave huge priority to unconventional types of aircraft machine. The Germans were leading the world in rocketry. They were leading the world in unconventional anti-gravity research, and they were leading the world in unconventional propulsion systems. There were certainly prototypes, there were plenty of blueprints, and there appears to have been one successful flight. Short and not very far, but still a successful test flight.
First of all, nobody else had a UFO program, only Germany, it would appear. And at first, as you might expect, it didn't really succeed, but there's accounts of spherical craft, UFO-looking crafts, launching into the air, but only a few feet and only for a brief period of time. But later, in World War II, there's all kinds of accounts of these Foo Fighters, a generic term given to these spherical devices that were approaching Allied planes and just causing a distraction, but also aggressively behaving and, in many instances, attacking the Allied planes. The characteristics of the Foo Fighters, they were really bright, and not overly large, small sort of inflamed-looking spherical objects that behaved very erratically. And that's the thing that really gave the Allies the distinct impression that this is advanced technology. First of all, what is this ball of light doing following my plane? And how can it possibly behave so strangely? It can move so quickly and turn on a dime and go back the other direction and then attack. This was brand new, and you can imagine how frightening it was to people who were flying conventional crafts at the time.
Did the Nazis take the blueprints to build these round flying machines, and did they make them? And did they fly them to their secret bases in Antarctica?
It was so secret that very few people, even within the Third Reich, knew about it. It was top secret research. I mean, only certain engineers were involved. And the actual designers of this particular flying saucer went on to work in America and Canada.
The super-secretive Nazi Vril Society used female mediums to contact ancient races, even, it said, extraterrestrial life forms. It's believed that this led to the Nazis' development of real-life UFOs, which they hoped would win them the war. Researcher and historian Theo Pymans has collected a number of original documents from the Vril Society that avoided destruction at the end of the war, and would shed a light on some of their secret activities.
Now, there's a huge amount of mythology surrounding the Vril Society. And I've been researching this topic for more than 25 years after having first read it. And if you look upon the Vril Society, you see that there's various kinds of stories. There's a huge amount of tales. In fact, what I found out was that their main focus and their main thrust was the development of a new kind of technology. And after many, many years of research, I finally was able to find some documentary evidence. Reading these texts, what became immediately clear that the technology that they describe is a mixture of avant-garde technology, but also esoteric thought, which is very interesting. It is as if these people discovered something so new and so different from everything there was before that they could only resort to certain esoteric phrases in order to describe what they had found. Now, and the key element of this technology was they only would be needing one machine in order to give the whole world this form of technology.
But it wasn't only technology and spacecraft at the heart of the Vril Society. It was said that there were female mediums who claimed to channel messages from the extraterrestrials to the Nazis.
They had what's now known simply as the Vril women. Apparently there was a kind of inner circle of mediumistic women. There was one called Mariah Orsek, there was one just known as Sigrun, and they were supposed to be rather beautiful. They had incredibly long hair, which, I mean, I'm sorry, I am going to smile because it is mad. They believed that this long hair acted as antennae for them to be in touch with these aliens. There were reports that in one particular seance, these female Vril mediums contacted extraterrestrials from the constellation of Taurus, who gave them, through automatic writing, messages. One was a message in Templar code, allegedly. One was apparently ancient Sumerian writing, and one, which was really quite special, was the blueprint for some form of flying saucer. What was interesting was attending that particular seance were Nazi engineers and people who would seize on that and think, we could maybe make something of this, literally.
When you analyze the few remaining Vril Society documents, it seems clear that its members were intent on developing a real flying saucer of some description. Theo Pymans has unearthed a document from the archives which seems to point to some extraterrestrial force.
This is a very obscure pamphlet. You can only find it in one library today, and in it they describe this novel form of technology, and they even ask people, if you are interested in this, come join us. Now, people might wonder, okay, why did such an organization or such a secretive group like the Vril Society exist in Germany and not, say, in other parts of the world? Well, we must understand that there's a couple of factors involved. In the 1920s, 1930s, Germany was at the forefront of new discoveries. We must understand that even people like Albert Einstein originally came from the German language areas. And there's also the fact that German engineering was at the peak of what it was able to do.
Although most of Nazi Germany was destroyed after the war, there are still some important locations left. One of them is a beer hall in Munich, where Hitler, Himmler, and other top Nazi officials met as part of a secret society. The man in charge was Dietrich Eckart.
Eckart was one of the hugest, absolutely devastating influences on Hitler's thoughts. He was the man that not only introduced him to these things, but he got him to take part in various rituals and to develop willpower and to develop the art of magnetism on not simply the ordinary level in which people can be magnetic, but to take it to another level. He believed that he was in touch with the secret chiefs, these kind of beings that were, according to various theories, they might be fallen angels, they might be living underground, they could be even extraterrestrials in some interpretations, although at the very least they were seen as a kind of superior species above human beings. As a result of these techniques, if you want to call them that he was taught, he developed a far greater degrees of concentration, the greater of willpower. He developed the ability to make people change their minds, but not through using rational arguments. He would kind of use a kind of force of, not just simply a force of personality, but he genuinely believed it was a kind of external force that he could control.
One of the things that came out of the Nazi secret societies was a total and almost manic belief in a white or Aryan super race. Most people today are aware of the Nazi persecution of the Jews and other racial minorities during the war. But very few know that its origins lay in the highly esoteric meetings that took place behind closed doors in Germany.
In the eyes of Himmler and Hitler, the pure German was tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, racially pure. And this is the foundation of what became the Holocaust. This was the ancient Aryan archetype that they associate with their society that goes back hundreds of thousands of years and goes back to the lost civilization of Atlantis. That's how they were thinking of themselves.
They believed the Aryan race probably went back 10,000 years, that they had soiled themselves by sleeping with lesser races, by joining with them, joining their blood with them, scattering throughout the world, and that they had to come back together again. And that the best place to do that, the place where you found the most of them, was Germany.
They are so ambitious. And they see that fertility rates are going down, the population's declining, but they want to do all this stuff. They want to dominate the world. So they create a program, the Lebensborn program, that's all about rapidly developing a racially pure Germany.
The Lebensborn program was founded in 1935 and was one of the most secretive projects of Nazi Germany. The plan was audacious and simple: create a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed master race that would take over the world. Gisela Heidenreich is a product of this genetic engineering. Her father was a Nazi SS officer, and he agreed to be part of the experiment, which is believed to have created over 8,000 Aryan children.
The mothers who wanted to give birth to their child, they had to have special attributes. They had to have a special height. They should be at least dark blonde. They should have blue eyes. And they should claim the father of their children, even if they were not married, that he was also kind of a Aryan race. As many of the fathers actually were SS officers, so it was very simple, because the SS officers, they would, even if they were not married to those women, they would give them a kind of certification that they said, I am the father of this child which would be given birth to now. It was some of a special society from the very beginning. So I think even people who had no knowledge about it, they would say, well, something is very sinister about these homes. But it was just like a program for the ideal of the Aryan race.
There was certainly an understanding with Lebensborn. They didn't think that it was going to die in 1945. These people thought in terms of a 1,000-year Reich.
It didn't stop there. The Lebensborn program also stole babies. They stole thousands of them, mostly from neighboring countries to the north that they viewed were ethnically pure.
When they went into Poland and found that many of these children were Aryan-looking, they were taken from their parents. And they were put in internment homes for a while, and they were placed with German families so that they could be Aryanized. It was the same. It was all the same program. It was all called Lebensborn.
They still had a stringent selection criteria. The parents, the father, the mother, they couldn't have any non-Caucasian blood tracing back 3 generations. They couldn't have any Jewish blood. These children were taken away, just robbed from their parents and brought into houses that were developed in many different countries that the Germans were controlling, and they were brought up in the hands of people who would Germanicize them. That was the master plan.
As well as an Aryan race, the Nazis were driven to get their hands on important holy and occult relics. Ross Andrews is an author and historian and an expert on the Nazis' occult plans. He says that Himmler, Hitler, and other leading generals were obsessed with the Knights Templar and their quests for both the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. He believes that it's possible that the Templars buried those holy treasures in a cave under the village of Royston in Hertfordshire, before moving them to other sites, including Roslin Chapel in Scotland.
Himmler was obsessed with the occult, like a lot of the top brass of the Nazi party, but he in particular wanted to appropriate pretty much all religion into his German religion that he was building. He wanted to get hold of as many relics as he possibly could get hold of. They'd already had the Spear of Destiny. They were after anything else that could possibly have been had by the Templars. So if the Templars had had the Ark, if they'd had the Holy Grail, he wanted hold of it. If we look at the castle that he built a chamber very, very similar to this. It was a circular room, it was a recessed floor as well, for initiation purposes. So it's like he possibly wanted this room in his castle as well.
Royston Cave was rediscovered in the 17th century and was thought to be a ritualistic space for the Templars, as well as a storage facility and perhaps a strong room for their holy relics that they brought back from Jerusalem.
Himmler absolutely loved the Templars. He was great at marketing, to the extent that they would have pictures of the Templars, and on their arms they'd be carrying the swastika and SS symbols. And so they were almost like, for Himmler, they were the pin-up boys for his new religion. We know that the Templars were in charge of money, they invented banking, they were possibly the hoarders of vast treasures. Things they found under the Temple Mount, for example, possibly came to this country, and they needed somewhere to be held. Now, there's a distinct possibility that this room here in Royston was a vault that things were held in before they ended up in Roslin Chapel in Scotland or ended up elsewhere.
Ross is sure that Himmler sent agents to check out this cave, using local contacts either before or during World War II, but found the empty chamber that we see today.
Himmler spent a fortune And as archaeology goes, no one in the history of ever has spent anywhere near as much as he did. He was obsessed with finding the Ark. He was obsessed with finding as many holy relics as he possibly could. They paid millions in today's money to send a group out to Tibet. They went down into Africa. They traveled the world searching for these things. Now, he also knew a lot of the legends and mysteries that the Templars talked of. So he had a belief that the Templars possibly had found the Holy Grail. He had a belief that they had found the Ark of the Covenant. He wanted to get to a place like this where he may have been able to pick up a few more clues and hopefully have found the things he needed.
The Nazis were obsessed with finding the greatest holy relics of antiquity, including both the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. They saw themselves as crusading Aryan knights who would return the world to a racial purity and a new golden age.
Himmler himself was very steeped in the occult and wanted to recreate the Teutonic Knights. The uniforms, the design, the entire look, the runic symbols, the SS of runes, which were classed as a mystical language that could be used for divination and that created words of power. And there was a lot around power, the idea that they were chasing holy relics like the Spear of Longinus and the Holy Grail. These are like any religious relics. They're items that supposedly hold power. So it's this quest for power, this desperate need to find power in any form.
Templars were massive relic hunters. They dug things up out of Jerusalem, they went into Africa, into Ethiopia, they possibly got hold of the Ark of the Covenant. They possibly got hold of the Holy Grail. Now, if those things ended up in this country, there's a distinct possibility they would have come from the south coast, heading up north, heading towards Scotland, for example. This would have been the perfect place to have stored it on its journey as it headed north.
What's also fascinating about this location is its similarity to the castle in Wewelsburg, where the Nazis also built an initiatory crypt for their ceremonies, but on a much larger scale.
What we have here, obviously the fascinating walls around us, but what makes this truly fascinating is the floor, which I know is a bizarre concept, but if you see here, you'll see the actual corners here have been carved out. This is an octagonal floor, which is unlike any kind of religious building you would normally have in this country. You normally have a cross-shaped. Now, it meant that if you had an altar in here, it didn't have to be east-west. This may have been some form of copy of the original temples they built at the Temple Mount, which meant they didn't have to face towards Jerusalem. They were the center of the world, which kind of leads us to think that this is some form of initiation or ritual building that Templars would have come in to perform some form of ritual within their religion.
In all of this purity, there's something very nationalistic. There's a national identity that they're trying to protect. This ideal of almost the medieval German Teutonic knight. And they felt that there was a pure Germanic blood that had to be protected.
Yeah, Himmler had obviously studied all the mysteries, studied the legends, and to him, he had seen this group of knights. They were strong, they were white, which is one of the most important things that the Aryan beliefs could have had. And he'd seen these people throughout history doing the things that he wanted. He wanted these treasures, he wanted these relics, and to him, he almost wanted to be one of the Templars. Now, if the Templars managed to get hold of the Ark of the Covenant, if they got hold of the Holy Grail, or something that they thought was that, some form of holy relic, it's a distinct probability that it would have ended up here. And it would have been placed in this lower area, and they would have been down here worshipping it. Now, we don't have proof of that. We haven't got photographs. We haven't got CCTV from the Middle Ages down here. But just by using logic, that's the kind of thing that they obviously would have done down here.
By the time World War II started in 1939, the Nazi Party and its leaders were already firm believers in the powers of the occult. Heinrich Himmler, second in command only to the Führer, was intent on turning Wewelsburg into his own vision of a Grail castle. built to house the greatest holy relics of history, including the Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny, and the Holy Grail itself. Himmler, and to some extent Hitler, ardently believed that if they could possess these almost mythical relics, then the world would fall at their feet and they could rule the world as a white super race, like modern-day Knights Templars. Their secret societies, like Thule and Vril, were wholly focused on that objective, mixing ancient texts and rituals with the occult.
The Nazis were far more than bloodthirsty murderers.
All these ideas, as crazy as they sound, and there's no justifying them, mind you, but they're the product of almost 100 years of gradual sort of obsession about the occult. And combine obsession with the occult with growing nationalistic pride, and this is what you get. It's a really twisted result from what was originally just an interesting idea about how the world is structured.
I don't think those secret societies would have understood how distorted their view was. Their idea of purity and correctness was in fact evil, in a way, pure evil.
So many of these societies existed for the sole purpose of proving what was termed Ariosophy, what was termed the ideal of the Aryan race, and proving that what all those other scientists said was nonsense, that we, the German people, we do go back to Atlantis, we do go back 10 or 15,000 years, and we can prove it. So that is how the occultism, the Aryanism, it all began to play together. It was all playing the same long-playing record.
Well, the Nazis found a lot of stuff and stole it. So they've got artwork, statues, relics from all over the world. I think if they'd found something as important as the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, that would have been announced straight away. And it would have been such a morale boost for the German public, but more importantly, it would have, the morale of the people they were fighting would have just suddenly disappeared. Because how can you beat somebody that has the Ark of the Covenant?
This is pure science fiction. I mean, just look at what we have. We have UFOs. We have rocket launching factories built underground. We have stormtroopers. I mean, this is crazy stuff. It's way ahead of its time. It's because world domination is the goal, and it's just a shame it was driven by evil.
Behind the huge rallies and military might, Nazi Germany and its leadership were firm, if secret, believers in the occult and its powers. They dedicated huge resources to tracking down holy relics and immersed its leaders in rituals and ceremonies to try and unleash supernatural forces to help its aims in taking over the world. It was a plan that came to a spectacular end in 1945. The Priory of Sion is said to be a powerful, shadowy, secret society, which is believed to protect a profoundly ancient, sacred treasure, a treasure which, they claim, would bring the Vatican and all Christianity to its knees if it was revealed. The society came to the attention of the world in Dan Brown's bestseller, The Da Vinci Code, and many believe it does exist.
Priory of Sion are definitely real, and they definitely still exist. I'm aware of at least 9 current members of the order. I believe there are many more.
It's possibly a handful of people, but it is a front for other organizations.
They are a society with secrets, some secret ritual, some with an esoteric base that goes back 15th, 16th century, some of it.
But who are its members? And if it's real, what's its purpose?
Its purpose really is to, or has always been, to oversee the evolution of man. It's been about nothing else.
The Priory claim that they can trace their history back over 1,000 years.
It's an ancient organization that goes back to the time of the Crusades, led by thought leaders called Grand Masters, people like Da Vinci, Isaac Newton.
They also say they protect a great sacred treasure.
the treasure is either the body of Jesus, possibly the body of Mary, or that it's documents, that it's evidence, that it's gospels, that give evidence that the actual historic events were different to what we've got in the Bible.
And we meet a man who claims to be a member of the society today.
The Priory of Sion is a group of people with no strict structure. They all work towards a specific objective, studying spiritual and occult events.
The Priory of Sion first came to the attention of the public in the late 70s through the publication of a best-selling novel, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which created a huge controversy around the world by claiming that Jesus did not die on the cross, but survived to marry and raise a family with Mary Magdalene. The authors went on to claim that their descendants formed a holy bloodline which exists today, and which the Church in Rome still wants to stamp out. And if that wasn't enough, they also claimed that a secret society, the Priory of Sion, is sworn to protect the bloodline and its secrets. But what's the truth behind these incredible ideas? Is it all just a clever hoax? And if so, who's behind it and why?
In 1982, Michael Bagent, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln wrote a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And they based their research on an earlier French book that had been published that talked about an organization called the Priory of Zion. And in the book, it talks about how Mary Magdalene had fled the Holy Land and had a child by Jesus. And from that child descended the Merovingian line of French kings.
One of the purposes of the Priory of Sion, one of the reasons it exists, is to protect secrets. There's information, religious, spiritual information, that can only be let out at certain times in history because society has to be ready for it. So it would be deemed heretical or explosive or shocking.
According to the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, one of the secrets that the Priory of Sion keep is hard and definitive evidence of the marriage of Jesus to Mary Magdalene, evidence that would threaten accepted religious dogma and undermine over 1,000 years of Christian belief.
It's possible there's truth to the story that Mary Magdalene was pregnant with Christ's child. There's some question about Christ being married, and it was not mentioned in the Bible because it was unusual for a Jewish man in his 30s in those days to not be married. Mary Magdalene was present at the foot of the cross. She was there with the apostles. She was the first one that Christ revealed himself to when he rose from the dead. So there are many reasons why it's a popular theory, popularized by Dan Brown, that Mary Magdalene was married to Christ.
I read Holy Blood, Holy Grail years before Dan Brown came out, and it was for many people an earth-shattering assertion that the marriage at Cana had been rewritten, that it was Jesus' marriage, that it was Jesus' marriage to the Magdalene. These were all older ideas than most people thought. A generation had passed since anyone had seen them.
Bagent, Lee and Lincoln's book, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, hit the bookstands, and it built on the idea of the Priory of Sion as an age-old secret society, protectors of a bloodline, but this time they added to the Merovingian bloodline the idea that the Merovingians were descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So it was a sacred bloodline. And this, of course, just really took off. It excited everybody to the utmost. And then Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code didn't really add very much apart from stress the idea of the Priory of Sion as a secret society devoted to protecting the sacred bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
And it caused a huge scandal. It was heavily featured in the press because they'd arrived at the conclusion that Jesus was married and that he had fathered children. And this came as a great shock to many people who had been living under the belief that what their church had been telling them was true. And also it was very challenging for the Catholic Church because it went against 2,000 years of dogma. Because if there are descendants of Jesus, it puts the Pope into conflict as to whether he really is the single source as the most important religious person on earth. Suddenly there are challenges. If you've got a descendant of Jesus, should we be listening to somebody who's elected as a pope, or should we try and find these people?
After The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail became a bestseller, the Priory of Sion became this sort of sinister organization, and people thought that what had been shared so far was just the tip of the iceberg. What else has been concealed down through the ages? Who else is a member? What do they really control? Are they controlling our governments today?
In the early 1970s, a Frenchman claimed to be the then Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. His name was Pierre Plantard, and he agreed to be interviewed for the BBC in Paris.
Can you tell us whether the Priory of Sion still exists today?
À l'heure actuelle, Sion existe toujours.
Monsieur Plantard, over the centuries you have, how shall I put it, you have supported the Priory of Sion.
Nous avons soutenu Sion. Et Sion nous a soutenus.
We. Who are we?
Nous, je parle de la lignée mérovingienne, car notre lignée est issue de Dagobert II. Les Mérovingiens, ce sont eux qui ont fait la France.
Plantard claimed to be descended from the Merovingian line of kings in France, but he had absolutely no background with those line of kings.
So Pierre Plantard really was nobody. He was an editor of a magazine, small circulation, not on any sort of world stage, but guess what? That was his aspiration, to be on the world stage and to associate himself with a lineage, an ancient lineage, that would give him the political prowess to potentially be the King of France, if not Europe.
Historian and author Andrew Goff has spent much of his adult life investigating the Priory of Sion and recently tracked down the location where the Plantard interview was filmed.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. So nice to meet you.
Oh,
Thank you for allowing access. This is fantastic. So this is it. This is where the interview took place. So Plantard only ever gave one interview, and it was here. So, back in the 70s, Henry Lincoln, co-author of The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, interviewed him here in what was his flat. The thing is, Plantard totally looked the part. He was a little nervous. He was distinguished. He was a gentleman of a certain age. He was wearing, a fine suit, and he looked like the kind of guy you'd expect the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion would look like.
One of the most interesting aspects of Plantard's interview was his mention of an obscure village in southwestern France called Rennes-le-Château. He said that it held a great secret, a treasure, but not necessarily a material one.
Monsieur Plantard, is there still a secret at Rennes-le-Château?
Mais le secret n'est pas seulement à Rennes-le-Château. Il est aussi autour de Rennes-le-Château.
Will the treasure of Rennes-le-Château ever be found?
Ici, vous me parlez d'un trésor matériel. Ne parlons pas de trésor matériel. Disons simplement qu'il existe un secret à Rennes-le-Château. Il est possible qu'il existe autre chose autour de Rennes-le-Château.
Fascinating interview. I'll never forget the look on Plantard's face. Totally incredulous. Like, either can't believe you figured it out, or I can't believe you've come to this conclusion. I never really meant for any of this to be taken very seriously. For the life of me, I don't know which I believe.
When pushed by the BBC interviewer to reveal what the secret was that the Priory guarded, Plantard was less than forthcoming.
Je ne peux pas vous répondre à ce sujet.
Watching the interview today, it's really amazing to look at Plantard and how he behaved. He was nervous, and he's talking about things like the Priory of Sion, and he seems relatively comfortable with that. But when Lincoln asks him directly about the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and tells him what he thinks it is, Plantard's reaction is really peculiar. First of all, he says, the mystery is not in Rennes-le-Château, it's around it.
The small southern French village of Rennes-le-Château has been at the heart of the Priory of Sion mystery for over 40 years. It's said that in the 1890s, the village priest became fabulously rich overnight after digging up a vast treasure. But what did he discover? Was it gold and coins, or something much more important?
Rennes-le-Château is a small town in the French mountains that has some unique characteristics. A father named Sunier was in charge of a church there. Suddenly, in the 1800s, he started making lots of improvements to the church. Everybody wondered where his money came from. The rumor started that he had discovered buried treasure inside of the church.
The mysteries of Rennes-le-Château are three. Where did he get the money? What did he actually find? And why did he do with it what he did, which was the way that he's decorated his church is very unorthodox. So those are the underlying mysteries of Rennes, and they exist today. You can go and research them.
The possibilities of what Berenger Saunier found are almost endless. Did he find information about the whereabouts of the bodies of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene? Did he find something as simple as treasure from the French Revolution? Did he find heretical information that the church would have been nervous about getting out into the public, such as Jesus Christ not being crucified? The possibilities are really quite daunting.
Priory of Sion are clear that there is, or there were, very important items at Rennes-le-Château. They certainly allude to there being a body. And the question is, whose body? Because is it the body of Mary Magdalene? Is it the body of Jesus?
The Priory of Sion is said to be a shadowy and powerful clandestine society, which guards earth-shattering secrets about the origins of Christianity, including, it said, proof that Jesus did not die on the cross and that he married Mary Magdalene and had a family. The village of Rennes-le-Château in southwest France has long been a place of mystery connected to these incredible claims. According to the legend, the village priest at the end of the 19th century, Banijay Documentaries, was involved in a huge conspiracy. It's claimed that he found a great treasure here and became fabulously wealthy. Some say he found the tombs of Mary Magdalene and even Jesus Christ, while others say he discovered the hidden treasures of Jerusalem. There are even those who claim that he was handsomely paid off by the Vatican to cover up and maybe hand over whatever he discovered.
Rennes-le-Château is an interesting little town in the south of France in the mountains that has some interesting characteristics. A local priest named Berenger Saunier was in charge of the local parish. And suddenly in the 1800s, he started making massive changes to the church. The church was dedicated to Mary Magdalene, which was not that uncommon in the south of France. There was a cult known as the Black Madonna cult that basically venerated Mary Magdalene. So Sunier started making improvements to the church and built a big house and built a big tower and had suddenly come into a lot of money. And the question was where that money came from.
Historian Andrew Goff has spent years investigating the Priory of Sion and the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery. He believes that the village priest, Banijay Sabbah, deliberately left clues to what he discovered in the decoration of the church.
So this is the Church of St. Mary Magdalene. We walk in, and this is what we're greeted with. Amazing. I mean, a devil. What's a devil doing greeting you in a Catholic church or any kind of church? Actually, it's not a devil. It's Asmodeus, who is the keeper of Solomon's temple and treasure.
Asmodeus is known in mythology as the guardian of the great treasure of the Temple of Solomon, and it's very unusual to find the statue at the entrance of a church. Did Saunier place it here to signify that this church was a place that concealed a great treasure also? Some people believe that he left an enormous clue in one of the Stations of the Cross on the wall of the church.
This is really interesting. The Stations of the Cross are generally standard, but there's some that are really peculiar, and this is one of them. So this is Christ being moved into or out of the tomb. What makes it peculiar is the fact that it appears to be a nighttime scene. And it appears to be a nighttime scene because there's a moon in the upper left-hand corner, and by Jewish law, you can't have a burial at night. So it seems to be, researchers believe, calling attention to the fact that something is not quite right with the story about the burial and arguably the whole crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The implication here is that if Christ is being moved at night, he's still alive.
There's also a curious depiction of Mary Magdalene on the front of the altar inside the church.
In the mural on the altar depicts Mary Magdalene in a cave that is clearly in the landscape of Rennes-le-Chateau. You can see one of the local mountains from the cave. And there is a grave next to her. She is beside a grave with her fingers crossed, which is the classic depiction of Mary Magdalene in art. So that identifies her. And there is a grave with a cross made of wood with 2 live shoots growing from the cross. And this was thought to indicate that the tomb of Jesus was perhaps in the vicinity of Rennes-le-Chateau, and that there were 2 descendants from their marriage, that there were 2 children. So this was one of the origins of the bloodline, the idea of the bloodline of Jesus.
This is the altarpiece that Saunier commissioned or otherwise went and got himself. It's Mary Magdalene in a grotto, and it has all the symbolism you'd expect. But look at her fingers. Her fingers are crossed in a peculiar way, a symbolism of esoteric knowledge. On the left-hand side, as you're looking back from the grotto, you can see what I think is Rennes-le-Chateau.
Curiously, Saunier built a tower in his garden dedicated to Mary Magdalene. On its staircase inside is a small observation window which looks out across the valley to a burial site in some local cliffs, to what many believe locally was the burial place of Mary Magdalene after she came to France.
The theory went that Mary Magdalene had left the Holy Land while she was pregnant with Joseph of Arimathea and settled in southern France. As a result, this cult grew up in the south of France with this fascination with the Mary Magdalene story.
The fantastic thing about the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau is there are so many theories. Did Saunier find gold from the Visigoths who had sacked Rome after they sacked Jerusalem, and all the Temple of Solomon treasure is purportedly in this area and was looked after by the Cathars, who were also resident all around Rennes-le-Chateau? Or had he found or been told where he could find the body of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene? Did he find proof that Jesus Christ was not crucified, that he was swapped with religious zealots?
There's a number of possible treasures at Rennes-le-Château, or that were put there for a time and then moved. The treasure is either the body of Jesus, possibly the body of Mary, or their children, so some kind of family tomb relating to Jesus. Or that it's documents, that it's evidence, that it's gospels, that give evidence that the actual historic events were different to what we've got in the Bible. To me, that's more interesting and more important. I'd be more, bodies are bodies, but actual documentation from the time is a far more interesting idea.
The Priory of Sion has become one of the most infamous secret societies in the world, thanks in no small part to their critical role in Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. They claim to protect solid evidence that can prove that Jesus did not die on the cross, and in fact went on to marry Mary Magdalene, have children, and maybe even escape to southern France. But how real is this proof, and the society itself? Gino Sandri is a French artist and academic who also claims to be a member of the Priory of Sion. For many years, he worked as the right-hand man to Pierre Plantard, the former Grand Master of the Order. Today, he lives in Paris, where he agreed to be interviewed.
As a member of the Priory of Sion, I was working with Pierre Plantard. I was a general secretary. Therefore, I was in charge of public relations and external communications. I was there at the interview with Henri Lincoln and Pierre Plantard. I helped Pierre Plantard prepare the interview, to say the correct things to Henry. They talked about a treasure at Rennes-le-Château. People knew that there were treasures at Rennes. There were a lot of treasure hunters looking for material treasures. Researchers had found tombs. They have opened them and found certain things. But Pierre Plantard wanted to make very clear that Rennes is a place where there are many layers of treasure. By shining a spotlight on Rennes-le-Château, you attract the public's attention. Everyone starts looking at Rennes-le-Château. There are lots of things that are coded and secret, because the whole thing about the Merovingian kings and its lineage is all just a legend. We wanted to make this public knowledge because hidden behind these legends are certain truths, certain secrets that we want to be known.
One of the great mysteries of the Priory of Sion are the so-called secret dossiers that appeared at the National Library in Paris in 1964. They purport to show not only the history of the organization, but most importantly, a list of its Grand Masters.
One of the big pieces of evidence for the Priory of Sion was a series of documents that were found in the Bibliothèque Nationale in France, which is the National Archives there. And there was a list of Grand Masters dating back from the time of the Knights Templar that included all sorts of famous people like Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton, Jean Le Cocteau.
It's a who's who list of history. It's got Da Vinci on it. It's got all these important figures, artisans, painters, right the way through history, back to the old families. The early heads of the Priory of Sion were listed as members of the Knights Templar, the old nobility, like what would have been considered the bloodlines.
There's something quite intriguing about it, because although they couldn't possibly have been Grand Masters of the Priory of Sion, for various reasons, including the fact the Priory of Sion didn't exist until 1956, they're not random names. Yes, they're famous names, but they all had something in common. They're all interested in esoteric subjects. And it wasn't usually well known by the general public or even historians that Isaac Newton was an alchemist, or for that matter that Leonardo da Vinci was into esoteric stuff. I mean, that's fairly recent information. Whoever compiled the list had inside information about esoteric matters and who had been interested in it over the centuries.
If we believe the dossiers, then what it tells us is that the Priory of Zion is an ancient organization that goes back to the time of the Crusades, led by thought leaders called Grand Masters. And what they're doing is they're preserving an ancient order that is looking after a sacred bloodline going back to Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, and even before to the time of David.
Although there's no record of who deposited the so-called secret dossier into the National Library in 1964, it's thought that Pierre Plantard was behind it, in an attempt to legitimize the history of the society.
What it was in reality was a set of documents planted by Plantard in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And then later on, he discovered them and said that there was a royal bloodline, the Merovingian bloodline, that he could prove that that bloodline went back to Jesus Christ.
If you were to prove that Jesus didn't die on the cross, for example, that would have a detrimental impact if it was released at the wrong time to the wrong people. So the way Sion works is at various periods of time, what they call circuits, they release information. So they almost go dormant over long periods of time, sometimes hundreds of years, passing this information on through family bloodlines, aristocracy, and through secret societies, and sometimes through ritual. They will encode this information and pass it on to a time when society is prepared to understand it and to absorb it and to take it on.
One of those who claims to be passing this information on is an Englishman, Nicholas Haywood, who says that he is a spokesman for the Priory of Sion today, albeit in an unofficial capacity. He says they are a real organization, which is still very active today.
Represent the underground stream of vital knowledge, vital to man, man's evolution, man's past, for there have been many civilizations of man, far more than people think. I mean, and its purpose really is to, has always been to oversee the evolution of man. It's been about nothing else. Although, of course, it is esoteric, yes, in its nature. It is also mystical. It has to be, because man's origins are mystical. Normally, members are not permitted to divulge their membership. In fact, it's normal for them to deny it, even to the point of being, even though it may cause them legal problems, it may cause some political problems, it may cause them bankruptcy, it may cause them all kinds of unpleasantries, but that is part and parcel of the deal. Unless, of course, you agree to act as a spokesman, then obviously. I only know of 2 spokesmen for the Priory of Zion.
Who are they?
I'd rather not say. I'm acting as one.
But in terms of numbers, what would you say?
I'm not permitted to tell you what the numbers are. That was one thing that was made plain to me.
They are a society with secrets. Some secret ritual, some with an esoteric base that goes back 15th, 16th century, some of it. The point is often made that this goes back a long time. This is a question of honor. And if a man can't be trusted to keep the secret of a handshake, or the secret of a ritual, or an entrance password, how can he be trusted with anything else? That's not exactly a secret society. That's a society that has some secrets.
Haywood confirmed that while they do protect a great secret at Rennes-le-Château, it is not the body of Jesus Christ.
No, Jesus' body was not brought back to Rennes-le-Château at all. I will tell you now, Jesus' body was not brought back to Rennes-le-Château or its environs.
The Priory of Sion is one of the great enigmas of modern history. They claim to be an ancient secret society that protects evidence that Jesus did not die on the cross, but instead married Mary Magdalene and fathered a bloodline of descendants that still exists today. It's an incredible story, But is it true?
The Priory of Zion, or Zion, is a complete fabrication. The idea that this was some interior group protecting the blood of Christ. An absolute and complete fabrication.
I believe that there have been secret societies, and still are, that preserve information that, against current dogma of religion and politics, is kept quiet. Maybe they preserve artifacts. Fine, yeah, that's to be expected. I don't believe the Priory of Zion is one of those. I believe it was founded in 1956 by Pierre Plantard and his mates.
When the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail was released, it claimed that the priest of the village of Rennes-le-Château, Banijay Documentaries, discovered some coded parchments at the end of the 19th century during renovations of his church, which alluded to there being a great and sacred treasure buried there. Artist and author Jean-Luc Chimay claims that a French aristocrat, Philippe de Charassé, wrote and compiled these parchments alongside Pierre Plantard, and that the whole Priory of Sion affair was just an elaborate hoax. What's more, he claims to still have the original papers to prove it.
This is the dictionary of Bible that used Charassé to do the parchments of Rennes-le-Château.
He claims that de Charassé and Plantard lifted some text from an old reference book to create the coded parchments that were revealed to the world in Holy Blood, Holy Grail. They then added certain keywords to the text, including Sion, to make it say what they wanted.
It is the beginning of the story. If there are no parchments, there are no story. It's clear.
According to Chaumet, Pierre Plantard warned him not to go public with what he had seen, and therefore not reveal the huge hoax that they were hoping to pull off.
He gives me this, and he say to me, don't publish that, just 20 years after my death.
Plantard was claiming to be descended from the Merovingian line of kings, and that he was in fact in line to be the next king of France. This is something that he desperately wanted, and he was using the dossiers that were discovered in the Bibliothèque Nationale to back up his claim.
Plantard and his colleagues built the Rennes-le-Château mystery into their idea of creating the story of the Merovingian kings of France and their sacred bloodline. It was brilliantly done, imposing one story on the other.
The whole idea that you could fake a lineage and become a king as a result of it, that's something I think would have worked maybe 500 years ago in medieval days. It's not going to work in the 20th century. There's no way. It's amazing to me that they weren't laughed out of Paris, laughed out of France when they tried in the first place.
On closer inspection, the three main figures behind the modern Priory of Sion had a checkered past. So how much can we really believe them? Philippe de Charassé was a disgraced and penniless aristocrat. Gerard de Sède was a struggling author, and Pierre Plantard was a convicted fraudster.
There's a white elephant in this story. It's the fact that Plantard, de Charassé, and de Sède, their ambition to create this hoax, it should be applauded. It is amazing. It is a long con, and I don't think they ever dreamed they would be as successful as they were. What were they trying to do? They were trying to write history, to rewrite it, to create an expectancy about who should be the King of France.
Plantard was a con man whose reputation went back for decades. He had a history of starting these organizations and claiming hundreds or thousands of members that never had more than one or two people. And in fact, the Priory of Zion was started in the 1950s as an organization to lobby for better public housing. and had nothing to do with the line of Merovingian kings or the body of Christ or anything else.
When you make a claim like you are the rightful heir to the throne of your country, or even if you insinuate that, guess what? That's not going to be welcomed very cordially. So the courts got involved and said, excuse me, we have a system here, elections. What are you trying to say? You should be king? Didn't go down well. And they took him to court. And as you might expect, he had to admit, and did admit, that he made it all up. It was a fraud.
If it was a huge hoax, there are still elements of the puzzle that don't quite add up. In 1963, French artist and former Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, Jean Cocteau, painted a mysterious mural in a church in London's West End. In it seems to be real clues, which support the Priory's claims that Jesus didn't die on the cross. Author and historian Lynn Pinknett agrees.
This is not the straightforward biblical story, quite clearly. For a start, you assume that it's Jesus who's being crucified, but actually there's no proof, because all you see is the man who is being crucified basically from the knees down. Allegedly, the Priory of Sion believed that Jesus did not die on the cross and that there was a surrogate killed in his place.
In Cocteau's work, we find many motifs of death and resurrection. He painted a mural in the French church in London, which shows a scene of the crucifixion, whilst also displaying one character that appears to be Jesus, not being crucified at the foot of the cross. You can only see the feet. It also originally had a mural at the front with an M made up of Mary Magdalene and Mary, and linking them, but that's been hidden, that's been covered over now. The hiding of codes and symbols in art has happened throughout history. I think a lot of painters were given information through history. They were seen as a means to revealing information. The good thing about painters is they work symbolically, and their works tend to be protected. Art is never destroyed. So it's a way of encoding things, of carving things into stone for future generations. You can put your symbolism into paintings. So it's common for art to be used to hide information and to protect information.
And over here, you see this extraordinary person looking very remorseful and upset, but with a beard and a fisheye. Now, there are other people in this painting with fish eyes, but this is the most marked one. And fish was the earliest symbol of Christianity. Now, could we be actually seeing here Jesus himself watching somebody else being crucified in his place? If there is one message to this, it's that Jesus did not die on the cross, and therefore he's not humanity's redeemer. And therefore, there's nothing special about him.
I mean, I don't believe the crucifixion was the fix is in, and we're going to pretend he's dead, make him fulfill the prophecies, and bring him back. I think that idea is upsetting and insulting to too many people. The Priory of Zion is not such an upsetting, insulting idea. It's just kooky.
The Priory of Sion is one of history's great enigmas. But how real is it? Are they an ancient group as they claim, who are sworn to protect a great secret, the survival of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion, and his marriage to Mary Magdalene, or is it a clever modern hoax created by Pierre Plantard and his friends back in the 1960s? The Da Vinci Code novel and subsequent movie brought the awareness of the Priory of Sion and the so-called bloodline theory to the attention of tens of millions of people around the world. There are even those who claim that the Priory was somehow behind the movie, using the opportunity to attack the false doctrine as they see it of the Vatican. Most historians say that there is simply no credible evidence for the existence of the Priory or their claims. and it lives on in the minds of conspiracy theorists. But there is a growing acceptance that the truth about Jesus and his life could well have been distorted and changed down through the centuries, and that we are moving towards a time when an altogether different and possibly more human figure might emerge as the leader of Christianity for a new millennium.
The aim of the Priory of Sion is to further mankind. It is always to further mankind for its betterment. And that may mean breaking a lot of religious dogma, a lot of societal mindsets, a lot of nationalism, a lot of things like that that restrict people and hold them back. So there'll be various opportunities in history where if the right information is released, enough people will recognize it and will feel internally that it's closer to the truth than what they're being told.
The thing about the Priory is it's a bit like a magpie in the sense that it picks bits of myths and legends and puts them all together to make this mystifying but extraordinarily enticing and romantic story that just draws people in.
I don't think there's very much that you could find that would change the essential beliefs of Christianity. I really don't. I don't think the discovery that Jesus might have been married upset people as much as you might have expected. I don't think it would have changed too many people's faith. Christianity is too deeply ingrained in what we believe.
I don't believe the Priory of Zion is real. There may be people who claim to be members today, but I don't think there's an organization around anymore. There's too much evidence that Plantard was planting all this stuff and making up these wild stories that I just don't believe that there's anything to them.
We don't know for sure if there's a Priory of Zion or not. They come out in public a little bit, they lift the veil for a week or two, give us a quote, and they run away and hide. So I'd like a little bit of coming forth. I'd like a little bit of validation that they exist.
Everything to do with the Priory is like a kaleidoscope. You know, you shift it and you shift it and you see little bits that might seem to go together, and then you shift it again and you think, it's all come together, and then it starts moving again, you know, into fragments. Because no one explanation ever works on any part of the Priory of Sion mystery.
Priory of Sion have existed for a long time, but they've used different names, and that's why they're so hard to trace and easy for people to say they don't exist. And it's a way of protecting information through history. You create an underground stream of information that you pass through different groups, and then at various points in history, it's brought back together and it's released, a piece at a time.
It's possible that what's claimed to be the core secret of the Priory of Sion is in fact true. That Jesus married Mary Magdalene and then fled with her to France to avoid further trouble with the authorities in Jerusalem. It's also possible that they remained buried there, maybe in Rennes-le-Château, and that the evidence to prove these facts has been kept and concealed down through the centuries. And that was probably the Priory's greatest trick, to fuse history and conspiracy theory so seamlessly that there would be kernels of truth in their story, allowing people to make a leap of faith towards believing their version of events. Add in the incredible success of Holy Blood, Holy Grail and the Da Vinci Code, and the Priory of Sion's story was catapulted into millions of homes across the planet, and a modern urban legend was born.